Hello and welcome to the Actual Tech Media EcoCast. My name is Jess and I am excited to be here with you all today. But before we jump into our content, I have some basic information that I want to cover with you. All right, let's kick off our day here today by taking a quick tour of your audience console. And we're going to start with the questions window. So if you haven't already said hi, there is a whole audience of cool humans out there, so reach out and give a wave to the other members of the Actual Tech Media community. Now, keep in mind that if you do have any technical issues today, a browser refresh is going to fix just about anything. But if those tech gremlins are clinging on today, no problem. Just throw a comment in the question section and our crew will be there to help. We also want this to be an informative webinar for you, so throughout today's EcoCast, we hope you'll get engaged and ask all your burning questions. Not only will we have team members responding to you over a live chat, we will also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of our presentations. Now, if we don't get to your question during the live webinar today, don't worry, because the awesome experts that we have here with us will be following up after we wrap. All right, next up, there's going to be lots of cool aha moments on the EcoCast today, and if you want to share those with your community, we've made it nice and easy for you. You can use the Twitter button right there in your audience console, and the hashtag for today's EcoCast will be automatically added to your post. All right, our last stop on this guided tour, be sure to check out the Handouts tab for some awesome resources and takeaways from our speakers here today. We have an info pack collection, solution briefs, white papers, data sheets, free trials, ebooks, upcoming webinars, and more. So many great resources, so be sure to go explore. Now, if that wasn't enough fun, we also have some exciting prizes that we'll be giving away throughout today's EcoCast. I'm going to tell you a bit more about those later on, but a few quick reminders for you all. First, you do need to be here live in attendance at the EcoCast in order to qualify to win a prize, and we will follow up with all of you after we wrap. Now, all winners must submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media, and all winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. Now, if you don't know what those full T's and C's are, that's fine. We've got the full thing for you. Just head on over to that Handouts tab, click in, scroll down to the bottom, and you'll find them waiting for you there. Now, the absolute most important thing to remember is that we love getting all your insightful questions during these live webinars. In fact, we love it so much that we actually have a special additional prize for all you inquisitive folks out there. So in today's EcoCast, we will be giving away a prize for the best question asked in each of our live sessions. Now, the expert speakers and teams will review all questions asked after we wrap the webinar, which means that even if your question does not get read out in a live session, there is still a chance to win. If you are a lucky winner here today and you would like to donate the value of your prize, we have several wonderful organizations that we partner with. So let us know when we follow up about your big win, and we'll get that rolling for you. Again, we are so happy to have you all here with us live at the EcoCast today, and we want to keep that good feeling going, so let's connect on social media. Reach out and connect with Actual Tech Media on Twitter and on LinkedIn. We have lots of great content, and we always want to hear from you. Now, if you're looking for more awesome content and resources right after we wrap the EcoCast today, be sure to subscribe to the Actual Tech Media channel on YouTube. Another fun way to win a prize and, hey, grow this awesome community is to refer an industry friend or a coworker to the Actual Tech Media webinar series. Now, you'll find a link to do that right in your Handouts tab, and you will also be automatically redirected at the end of the webinar. And both you and your coworker or friend could win a prize, and we hold those drawings every month. So be sure to refer a friend because, it could quite literally be a win-win situation. Next, we have a cool opportunity for all the decision makers out there to get connected with new and emerging tech and innovative vendors. Here's how it works. All you need to do is click on the link in your Handouts tab, fill out a quick application, and the Actual Tech crew will then match you with some vendors that we think you should probably be chatting with based on your needs. There will also be fun opportunities that you get to choose to join in, like surveys, test runs, new solutions, extended demos, and so on. You'll get some chances to win extra prizes, you'll chat with great people, and you'll learn about the hottest new trends in tech. So be sure to apply, or hey, send that link to a decision maker on your team. Now, I want to take a quick minute here to remind you all about one of my favorite resources, and that is ransomware.org. You can find out everything you need to know about ransomware, how to prepare, prevent, and recover. This site is jam-packed with information, helpful tips, checklists, strategic approaches, case studies, everything you need in one place. So wherever you are in your ransomware preparedness journey, there is something for you at ransomware.org. Go check it out and start exploring. All right, I have one more exciting resource I have to tell you about today, and that is the Gorilla Guide Book Club. It's going to give you access to free enterprise IT books authored by top industry experts, so you can stay up to date on trending enterprise technology. And yes, these books will work on your Kindle, your mobile device, and as I said, they are completely free. You can download these awesome resources at gorilla.guide, and there's a link for you in that Handouts tab as well. All right, well, we have covered a lot of important things already, and I don't know about you all, but I am excited to dive in. So let's get going. All right, so we are going to jump into the good stuff now, okay, because we are talking about preventing phishing attacks. And this is such an important conversation to dig into as we explore this brave new world of not only remote, but flexible workplaces, work from anywhere, hybrid models. Our workforce has never had so much flexibility, and that's great. I love that, but it is also a bit scary. I'm picturing, you know, that classic movie scene in a historical movie or a fantasy war movie, and they have that big fake map out on the table, and all the little wooden pieces are kind of indicating where your troops are and where the enemy troops are, and then they push them around on the map. Yeah, so it's that, except now all our pieces are just confetti thrown all over the map, and that makes it pretty hard to protect. So we recognize this as a challenge, and so do the threat actors, but this distributed workforce model is here to stay. And that means we have to figure out a way to make sure that we're staying as protected as possible. So what do? Do we invest in technology? Do we focus on training and education? Is it AI and ML that's the solution? Well, the good news is that you are asking the right questions. And today, we're going to get some answers. Today, we'll be chatting with top experts here with us from Graphis, Rubrik, Duo Security, Cofense, Palo Alto Networks, CyberArk, and ReliaQuest. This is such a powerhouse collection. I cannot wait to get started. But I have one last thing that I have to tell you about before we jump in, because I said I would come back to those prizes. So today on the EcoCast, you could win one of three $300 Amazon gift cards that we will be giving away to 3 lucky winners who are here present and live with us at the EcoCast. Now, I mentioned in the housekeeping chat this morning, you will find the full T's and C's in that Handouts tab. So if you have any questions about that, you can find them linked for you there. And with that little thing out of the way, let's keep rolling into our EcoCast. So we want to kick things off today with a little bit of a question, because here's the thing. Everything we're talking about today is, you know, in big flashing red letters, the human element. And so let's start with the humans out there. This is going to be an interactive day. We want to make sure that we're chatting and conversing with our speakers. So this is your test run. So we're going to make sure that your brains and your fingers are all nimbled up and stretched and ready to go. So give your hands a shake right now. Lean forward and click on the poll on the screen in front of you. So what I'm wondering, a quick little test here, which of the terms that you see up on the screen is not a form of phishing attack? Which one is not a form of phishing attack? So click on which one you think is not real. I'm going to leave this up for another second, and then I will give you the answer to it. All right, so thank you to everyone who is clicking. Now, okay, I have to preface this with, I will tell you which one I made up. However, I actually made up a couple of words to throw in here, and then I Googled them because I was like, oh, I should check and make sure this doesn't actually exist. And a few of them actually did. Like, for example, one of the ones I threw in there was twishing, because I thought, well, that's not real. Turns out that's Twitter phishing. So full disclosure, if somebody out there wants to prove me wrong and find a version of phishing, but rishing, W-R-I-S-H-I-N-G, is actually not real. That one I made up. So as far as I know, that doesn't exist. But of course, the other one, spear phishing, we know that's a personalized attack. That's targeting you specifically. Whaling is a personalized attack that's going after the big fishes in your company, like a CEO and executive. Smishing, that's a phishing attack using SMS or text. Quishing, that's a fun one. That's a new one. That's using the quick response to QR codes. Vishing, of course, we've got voice phishing, so that's that new kind of thing that I think we're seeing a little bit more of here. And these are all funny words, yes, but they are not niche occurrences. And in fact, there was a recent report I saw in Forbes that was from Lookout that said non-email-based phishing attacks are also proliferating, boy, good morning, with vishing, that's the voice phishing, smishing, SMS phishing, and quishing, QR code phishing, increasing 7-fold in the second quarter of 2022. Yeah, 7-fold in the second quarter of 2022. So yes, not things that we can ignore. And this is not even including things like Trojan horses, keyloggers, malvertising, domain spoofing, evil twin Wi-Fi, and so on. You know, when I start listening to those, it kind of starts to sound a little bit like a list of old sci-fi movies. But unfortunately, these are all real threats. And this is partially what we're here to talk about today, because these threats are evolving constantly. So that's going to bring us into our next question that I have for you all. Now, I'm going to show you the results of this one. I am going to show you the results of the phishing. Sorry, I was just looking at the question here. Jerry was wondering if I could explain why that answer is. Why rishing is not real, Jerry, or if you have a clarification, Jerry, shoot me a message and I'll follow up with you, I promise. Okay, so does phishing training work? This is what I'm wondering here. And again, I'm going to show the results, but I'm not going to see who clicked on what. So this is not a trick question. This is just your opinion. Do you think that training actually helps reduce the threat of phishing? So absolutely, we absolutely have to do it. It's fine, but really I'd rather focus on the tools, or I really have no idea. Honestly, I'm just in over my head. And we're just kind of curious, and again, I'm going to show you the results in just a second here. So if you, last chance to click, okay. Perfect. So does phishing training really work? You're all kind of saying, yeah, about 65% of you said it absolutely does, and it is vital to our security program. But there's still about 30% of you that were saying, nope, I don't really think it works. I'm going to go ahead and focus on the tools and the tech. And I get that, honestly. I really do. Now, I'll be honest, I have a little bit of a bias towards training. I do absolutely think that sure, it's not the answer. I think you also need a bit of a 1-2 punch. You need the training and the tech. But I think it's really important to have the ongoing training, especially that speaks to people in a way that they can understand, something that's easy, that's chunked, really like the things that we've seen happening with mobile training. And with the workforce being what it is and as stretched as we are, I think that we can all maybe roll our eyes sometimes at training or laugh about people never learning, and I know that we all do that from time to time, but we really don't have another choice as I see it. We'll never be able to lock down that entire board, that entire moving pieces board, and still allow people to do their work effectively. So I think we really need both. Which brings us to my last question for you about this. Wondering if your organization has conducted internal training about phishing in the last 6 months. So the answer is here, oh, you betcha. It's me channeling my Midwestern. Not in the last 6 months, but we have done it. Or nope, we've done zero training. So again, this is just a pure curiosity. I will show you the results in just a moment, but no one will see who clicked what. So you're not giving away any company secrets. Just curious what kind of training you guys have done. And I'm seeing a few comments coming in with people saying, yeah, people are your weakest link, and we should be providing more training and education to staff than we do currently. Short and sweet and frequent is important. I really appreciate that. That's coming from Scott. That's a great comment there. All right, so I'm going to flip on over to the results here, and let's see what you all said. All right, so my organization has conducted internal training about phishing in the last 6 months. About 60-some% of you said, oh, you betcha. And then after that, about 20% saying not in the last 6 months. And there was about 12% saying zero training done. That's scary a little bit. So if you're in one of those organizations where you guys have done zero training, that might be a good thing to raise your hand and bring to the team. I'm hearing Dan here says social engineering is critical. Yeah, and Roberto saying they have monthly training. Yeah, that's great to have that regular training. Now, there's certainly an argument for if you're going to do monthly training, you need to make sure that you're keeping it interesting, right? You have to shake it up and offer different things. Otherwise, people get a little bored and their eyes tend to glaze over. So offering something a little bit different every month is really important. All right, well, that was it for our kind of opening questions. And what I think, and I hope you're all kind of taking away from that, is that there's still a lot of conversation to be had here. There's some debate around the importance of training and tools and how they can fit together, how often training should be conducted, how it should be conducted, who in the company should receive that training. So there's a lot of discussion. There's a lot of opportunity here, and that's a really exciting place to start an EcoCast like this one. Now, I just have a few more questions for you. This one you've seen from us before, and this kind of helps our speakers know what your urgency is. So this is a great sort of level set for all of us. What's the timeline that you're thinking about adding new or updating existing IT? So if we're talking about adding new or updating existing IT, obviously in this case we're talking about phishing. So we'd be looking at, potentially implementing some of those training solutions, or looking at something, maybe a tool or a technology to automate some of those red flags. And we're going to learn about those options in just a moment here, but just trying to get an idea of what the timeline is. And I'm looking at a very even spread with maybe a few more of you leaning towards you're not sure. All right, so I have two bonus questions for you all. And we're going to go through this very quickly because then I want to get into our presentation. This question is a little bit of a different tone here. What we're talking about is in person. So obviously we love connecting with you folks in these virtual events, and this is so much fun for us. But we're curious what your interest is. And there's no wrong answer here. This is not a test question. We're curious if you'd be interested in connecting with Actual Tech Media live. So this first question here is, would you be interested in attending a live event with Actual Tech Media if it was within your a driving distance from your home or office? So this is if it's very close, if it's local, would you attend? Now I'm going to ask you in just a moment if you would travel. So if that changes your answer at all here, this is the important difference. So would you attend a live or in-person Actual Tech Media event? Would you come hang out with Scott, David, myself, Keith, and the crew at a live event if it was within driving distance? All right, now our very last question for you before we get into our awesome sessions here is, would you attend an in-person event if you had to travel? So if you had to get on a plane, now keep in mind getting on a plane could mean going someplace awesome and warm. Yesterday I had people writing in saying, yeah, Bali, Vegas, bring it on, beaches, sunshine. I'm into this. That sounds great. Please, that would be, if you could all just vote for in-person events happening in Bali and Vegas, I'm into that. But would you be likely to attend a large in-person Actual Tech Media event like this one if you had to travel to it, if you had to get on a plane? So let us know, and this is, again, just good information for us to have because we're always trying to make sure that we're getting the information that you need in the way that you need it. So if in-person is how you want to receive some of this information, we want to be aware of that and make sure that we're hitting that need for you all. Okay, well, I want to thank everyone who played along with me in our phishing game and then also answered those poll questions for us. That is really helpful information. But now it's time for all of you to sit back and absorb some information because we are going to kick off the EcoCast. It is my pleasure to introduce our first two expert presenters here with us today. We are definitely starting out with a bang because we have here with us Sammy Karkush, Solutions Specialist at Graphis, and Miles Walker, Channel Development Manager also at Graphis. Sammy and Miles, thank you both so much for being here with us to get us started, to kick us off. I know we have some great stuff planned for the audience today. I'm so excited to get rolling, so the platform is all yours.
Thanks so much. Really excited to be here. Actually, I'm really happy to be here because I'll tell you a little story. I was actually locked out on my patio for an hour this morning, and I'm actually just excited that I'm here because it was barely above freezing, the temperature, and I had shorts on and a sweatshirt and socks, and I had to call my building manager because my door accidentally locked. So happy to be here. Sammy, how are we doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. Luckily, I didn't get locked out on my patio, so it's been a good morning for me.
All right, well, sounds good. Let's dive in. We've got a lot to cover today. My name is Miles. Obviously, you heard from Sammy there, and we're here representing Graphis, and we're talking email security and phishing defense, our simple, powerful, and automated tool. What's so exciting, I know we dove into the world of phishing and spear phishing earlier, and I actually have a little story about phishing myself. I was actually born in a small town in southern Cornwall in England, and we actually left that town because my parents didn't want me to do the only thing that people do in our village, which is become fishermen. And now, full circle, 35 years later, I'm actually representing Graphis, which is an anti-phishing solution. So my mom tried to get me out of the small village so I wouldn't get into the phishing world, and they pulled me back in. You can see our info there, Sammy's email and my email. I know I just threw my LinkedIn into the chat. Do add me up because we do post a lot of content. We'd love you to repurpose. But without further ado, who is Graphis? We're a US-based company founded in 2015, so we are one of the grandfathers in the phishing world. When we first started, in the phishing game, there was probably about 3 or 4 companies doing what we do, and now there's probably over 10 companies that are doing anti-phishing. We integrate with Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace, and this past year we took home quite a few awards. We're really, really proud of Cybersecurity Excellence Awards, SMB Tech Fest, Best Innovation, Best New Solution, and Most Innovative Solution, as well as Category Leader, which we are now in for Get App. So 3 things we're really proud of. Obviously, simple, powerful, and automated. That's kind of what we build our business on. We can get you set up in minutes. We're a self-learning AI, and no manual rules needed, which I'll jump into in a little bit. But at the end of the day, our mission is to simplify and automate phishing defense. If you do not have a phishing solution currently in place, you probably will have one in the next 12 to 18 months. So start doing your research. Obviously, this presentation is a great place to start. I know there's some great products out there, and really get out there, listen to a demo, dive into the product and see what's right for you, because there's many different phishing solutions, and you want to make sure you have one that's robust and good for your business. So who are we trusted by? We've got a lot of great partners in the world. A lot of these companies are smaller or medium-sized businesses. Probably AWS would be the biggest one, the AWS Partner Network. We've probably seen all the ads for Dollar Shave Club. I know they were featured during the Super Bowl and a few other times. D-Link, we probably heard of, Nuke's Eatery. But these are some of the companies that are currently using Graphis, our anti-phishing solution. And lots of testimonials on our website so you can hear what they say. All right, so we talked a little bit about quishing and smishing and spear phishing and whaling earlier. But this is a big point. If you do have a camera, take it out, take a photo of this. This is great to share with your internal IT teams or the teams you manage. But 91% of cyber attacks start with a phishing email. This is something that I find so crazy. So 9 out of 10 attacks that we see are coming through some type of phishing email. And phishing is here, and it's here to stay. And sadly, that's not going to change. These cyber criminals really ramped up their phishing game during COVID, and they haven't stopped since. When I say they've ramped up their phishing game, we've seen an increase of 600% in phishing attacks since the start of the COVID pandemic. And a little tidbit that a lot of people don't know, which I always love to tell people when I'm talking, is that for those first 2 weeks, I think today it's March 15th. So exactly, if you can believe it, 3 years ago today, lockdown started, which is pretty crazy, pretty scary to think of. And I remember those first 2 weeks. I had just been in Mexico City for a conference, and I came back, and then everything got shut down. And for those first 2 weeks, when COVID was here and the lockdown started, what actually happened to phishing attacks? They actually went down for the first time in several years. And when I say they went down to an all-time low. And the reason why is because these cyber criminals were actually figuring out their own hybrid at-home work environment. So they had to get computers and they had to take them home. They had to get logged in. They had to take them home. And this is a pretty unbelievable scenario in the sense of phishing attacks went down and then they went straight up 600%. 1.5 million, that's new phishing websites that are made monthly. So phishing attacks are here. They're here to stay. We like to say it doesn't matter if you're small, medium, or large-scale business. You are going to get targeted. We see attacks all the time. For example, I just had a CrossFit gym in our hometown got hit with a phishing attack, and the ransom was a mere $9,000. Why did they give $9,000 ransom? Because they knew that they had about 14 grand in their bank account from hacking in. So this is an example of what these small cyber criminals are doing these days. They're not going after the large Intels, the Coca-Colas, the Googles of the world. They're actually going after the small companies, the small and medium-sized companies, because they're the low-hanging fruit. They don't have cyber tools in place to thwart these attacks. And lastly, probably the number that I want to jump in at, 4.69 million. That's the average cost of a successful BEC attack for a large organization. So business email compromise attack, these are happening more and more these days, and people are paying out. And 4.69 million was the average cost, up from well over $1 million just a couple years ago. All right, moving along. So we like to say that AI is the future of email security. AI is something, artificial intelligence or machine learning, that is very, very deep in our world already. Whether you're using GPT or anything else that has an AI base, this is going to continue in our life. I like to say we all probably watch Netflix, and each week Netflix recommends a bunch of movies that they think I'll like based on my previous watching habits. I have Apple Music. Each week I got a curated playlist based on what I have listened to over the past month. Your banking app, they'll actually recommend things to you that you maybe haven't thought of, whether that's, changing your accounts based on, your spending habits. And these are all based on AI technology. And you know what? Email security is part of that world. And why is AI so vital to the email security world? Well, cost savings, first of all. AI security gives you more protection without adding to the payroll. If you're going to bring on a new solution, you want to make sure you're not adding a lot of extra man or woman hours to that role. Obviously, improved cybersecurity posture, that's a big one. 42% of companies in an IBM survey cited AI and security automation as a major success factor at improving their cybersecurity posture. So AI is here. It's here to stay. Greater cyber resilience. And of course, at the end of the day, the biggest goal of having a new solution, an AI-based phishing solution, whether it's ours or one of our competitors, is you want to see fewer phishing emails that are reaching employees. That's the biggest goal. You want to make sure that they do not have the chance to get attacked. All right, moving along. So Graphis is our product. Obviously, what we're doing, we're improving cyber resilience, and we're bolstering your defense against today's biggest threats. For the third straight year, phishing attacks were the #1 vector used by cyber criminals to breach businesses and private citizens. So that is something that is so important to know. For 3 straight years, this has been the case, and this is not going to be changing anytime soon. This was also the first year since basically we've been keeping numbers on phishing attacks, that there's more attacks against small and medium-sized businesses than against large-scale businesses. So in the past, large-scale businesses were being attacked, and small and medium mom-and-pop businesses didn't have to worry about having a phishing solution in place, or even, basic cybersecurity tools. Why? Because they were hitting the large-scale businesses or enterprise. So I believe a couple of years ago it was about 90%, then 80%, then 70%, and now it's just below 50%. So that means it's not really a question right now of if, but when your company's going to get attacked. All right, so with Graphis, we offer 3 levels of protection. Phish 911 alert, the employee shield, which is our most visual layer of defense, and our malicious automatic quarantine, which is something I'm going to dive into in just a little bit. But what we do, we report phishing. We obviously give you those warning banners so your employees can actually help in the cyber resilience, and then we quarantine as well those emails. And the Trust Graph is the core of our protection. That's our AI-based solution. We like to say it's our secret sauce, so to speak. And this is where our patented AI technology analyzes historical as well as real-time communication patterns. So what does that mean? It looks at who you're communicating with. So which people you've talked to in the past, which devices you are using and which devices they are using, as well as networks. So that's the deep learning or machine learning going to work. And it determines the credibility and actually gives each email a trust score, almost like a credit score. So it looks at everything from which devices, IP addresses, subject, country. So if, for example, you're suddenly getting an email from, Alana in accounting, and her IP address is showing up as North Korea, and she didn't plan a nice holiday to North Korea, it will pull that up as probably an issue. It scans attachments to see if there's any malicious attachments. So it looks at about 50 different attributes to see if we're going to allow that email to come through to the end user. So that's something so important. That is our Trust Graph. That is our AI technology going to work. Automatic quarantine. This is where we automatically detect and quarantine malicious emails. And so often the employees will never even see these emails. If needed, obviously, we can hop in, we can analyze, and we can, resend back to a user's inbox if we realize that it's safe. And that would be done through the tech side, of course. But this is something that is so important because at the end of the day, we're protecting about 99% of all phishing emails. But these cyber criminals, they're getting smarter. They're figuring out new and innovative ways to sidestep boundaries. The numbers are out there that we protect more. An AI-based solution usually protects between 40 to 60% more than a secure email gateway because that is often based in rules and it hasn't evolved as much with the time. So this is an AI-based system, of course, that's in place. The employee warning shield banner. This is something that you will be using probably every day or every other day, and this is our most visual layer of defense. So when I say visual layer of defense, you will see this pop up on emails where something in the email looks suspicious, okay? And when I say that, that means it's maybe hit a lot of the targets in the trust graph, so we're going to allow it to come through, but we're not quite sure who this person is. And you can either report phishing or report a false positive. This is something so good because what it does, it actually allows that machine learning to evolve. And it now knows for next time that maybe that email that came through to Bashal right there is actually from a trusted sender. Okay. What's so great about this as well, it's a fully customizable banner, and it actually displays the type of phishing attack. So this one, for example, let's look at the one right here. The display name of this email closely resembles an executive's name in your organization. This executive generally sends emails from the domain, but this email has been sent from a different domain. So this is an example of how these warning banners move and evolve. And what's so great about it, you can actually update it with your own colors and your own message. I like to stick with the graphics color purple or pink there, but maybe you want to go with the red. So this is where you can alert your user, empower your user, and then you can also go in later and analyze that threat as well. Phish 911, our last layer of defense, is where reporting suspicious emails, you can just forward that email to an inbox, and it transforms your users into an active shield of defense. So lots of people say that the human element is a big thing when it comes to phishing, and that an employee is the biggest risk. We like to flip that on its head and turn that employee's biggest risk into the company's biggest asset. So you can report suspicious phishing emails, you can automatically quarantine, and then of course, if you want to, you can dive in as well and analyze that threat. Activation with us is really easy, from 0 to protected in minutes. Activates as an app, and that just takes a few minutes. And you're usually up and running within a couple hours. This works as via API as a Microsoft 365 or Google Workspace app, and it's simple to set up. Big thing when you're bringing on a new solution, you don't have to change any MX records. You don't have to install any agents on devices or configure email or filtering rules or policies. So far, we're only working with Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace, and potentially down the line that might change, but that's where we're at right now. The AI initialization, sorry about that, gets up and running quickly, and the self-learning algorithm is constantly analyzing new interactions and evaluating the trust rating to keep you protected against zero-day attacks. That is big. So if you're bringing on a new solution, you want to make sure it's up and running and it's easy on your tech team to use. But at the end of the day, the big thing that I want you to take about from this, we mentioned earlier, Graphis is 60% more effective than a traditional secure email gateway. Secure email gateways are great. They've been around for 20 years, but they just haven't evolved as much as some of the AI anti-phishing solutions out there. And what we're actually doing, I like to say, if we're talking about our elevator pitch, what we're doing is we're stopping 99% of all phishing attacks, and we're constantly learning. If there was a solution in place that could thwart 100% of all these attacks, it would be the most popular solution on the market, and everyone would be buying it. Sadly, there's no solution in place that can do that, but we're pretty close. So what we're really gaining with us is peace of mind. If we want to look at the NIST framework, this is something hopefully all of you are somewhat acknowledged about, which is the NIST security framework, where you identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. We have quite a few different solutions under our umbrella that would help you with that, whether it's our dark web ID, where we monitor for dark web credentials, or maybe our Kaseya VSA data RMM. Protect, Graphis, like I mentioned, that's what we're here about, anti-phishing solution. Bullfish ID is our security awareness training platform, a great product to pair up with Graphis. It's great to have, the keys to the kingdom, but you need to learn how to drive that car. So whether you're getting our Passly, which is our MFA password vault, or Rocket Cyber Managed SOC, or Datto EDR to detect, and lastly, respond and recover. This is part of the NIST framework. If you aren't using the NIST framework, this is something you should definitely be looking into. This is a great way for businesses to stay cyber secure, and you need to have solutions in place that go into all 5 of these categories here. Moving along, human-related causes are responsible for 90% of cybersecurity breaches. So you can do everything in your power to have solutions in place. You can do everything in power to have tools in place. But at the end of the day, if your team, if your employees aren't trained up on what to do when they see a phishing email in place, or they get tricked by a phishing email, you know what? You're going to be in trouble. And that's why we say pairing up security awareness training with phishing simulation solution in place is so key, because you need to have your employees doing this constantly. They say 11 times a year is what is needed. Some people do it once a month. Some people even do it twice a month. But organizations that regularly conduct cybersecurity awareness training have a 70% lower likelihood of experiencing a successful cyber attack. I saw those numbers earlier, and it said about 30% of you don't actually do cybersecurity awareness training or haven't done it in the last 6 months. If there's one piece of advice they can take away, is get a phishing solution, as well as pair it up with some type of security awareness training that works seamlessly. That is something that's super important. I always love to throw in a little bit of a movie quote here, but doing phishing simulations is no longer optional. And this is something that we've been saying now for months, and this is something that you're going to see more and more of 2023 coming forward. All companies, large, medium, or small, will be doing some type of phishing simulations, because these cyber criminals are hitting more and more often. This past year, we saw 1 million phishing attacks in a single quarter, which is the most we've ever seen. And if we're looking at cybercrime as a whole, we're looking at America with a $20 trillion GDP. We're looking at China next up with a $14 trillion GDP. And cyber criminals are in third place if we were looking at cyber criminals as a country at just under $11 trillion in GDP. So cyber criminals are here, and sadly, they're here to stay. I've got 2 more slides, then I'm going to jump into the questions. So we have an exclusive offer, 25% off our Graphis AI-powered phishing defense. We would love you to come on and have a demo and see what the solution actually looks like. I have Sammy, who is our #1 solutions engineer / specialist here, who's going to be taking questions right after this. But you do want to do your research. You want to see what those different anti-phishing solutions can do for you and your business and how robust they are. You need something that's clean and crisp and easy to get up and running, and that's where Sammy comes into play. So we are giving 25% off. Dive into a demo, have a look, see what's under the hood, and see if the product is right for you. We all obviously talked a little bit about security awareness training, a little bit about some of our other solutions like our dark web monitoring program, and those are great solutions to add on to Graphis as well. Lastly, if you are on LinkedIn, I do post a lot of content. Grab your phone, scan that QR code. I know we talked about Phishing earlier. This is not a Phishing QR code, so you don't have to worry. We have our big conferences going on next month. I know we were talking about conferences in warm destinations like Bali and Vegas. Well, we're going to be in Vegas next month, April 24th to the 27th. And we had Jason Alexander, a.k.a. George Costanza, as our keynote speaker. Hopefully I get the chance to chat with him and maybe do a little interview, but I'm super excited about that. We also got some discount codes. If you do reach out to me, I can get you some discounts on that. And because we were talking about good weather destinations, I was in Cancun last week for a conference. So I want to throw Cancun into the mix, along with Bali, along with Vegas, for destinations where we should maybe see, a conference with this whole crew and this whole team soon. Sammy, how we doing?
Very well, Miles.
Okay. Well, if we got any questions, Jess, filter them our way. We would love to take them.
We've got lots of questions. We've got more questions than we have time, that's for sure. But we're going to do our best to get into a few of these questions. And then if you guys have the time to stick around on live chat, there might be some great opportunities to follow up. Also, we will make sure that we get all of the questions asked on over to the team. Now, I'm going to move the slide quickly here. So grab that QR code, a non-Phishing QR code right now if you haven't already done so. And then I have a poll up on the screen for you all. So what we're looking for is what additional information you would like to get about the Graphis solution. So click on that poll now. Let Graphis know how they can follow up with you, what information you would like to get. I promise you your future self is going to thank you for clicking on that poll now, because you'll get some nice, easy information delivered right to you. All right. So guys, you ready to do just a few questions here, and then we'll call it a day, unfortunately?
Absolutely.
Amazing. Okay. I actually just want to start with this one because we got a few people asking if you could give us a little insight into what you think makes Graphis stand out in a field of, sort of phishing prevention tools that are already out there.
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a bit of a spectrum when it comes to phishing defense solutions. You have things that are more traditional filters that are great for just basic filtering. Generally, they're more hands-on. You have to create your own rules, and that might lead to more false positives or maybe being too porous. And then you have other solutions that are more on the AI side of things, just like Graphis, but usually they're a little bit more hands-on. I think Graphis really strikes a balance between effectiveness and automation. So one of the biggest things that we're proud of with Graphis is that it's able to learn over time, and it's always learning. And we're leveraging users through that banner, through the Employee Shield, to help us teach Graphis what's actually normal and the legitimate email and what's not. And so I think that's the biggest thing, is that it's a very hands-off platform and solution that is actually effective.
I love that. And sneaking in one further question here, I just want to make sure, because we got a few questions saying things like, is this going to work? The testing capabilities would work for mobile devices. Is it going to work for various industries? So one example was students. Can you just speak to sort of the variety of testing that's available, and if there's any limitations the audience should be aware of?
Yeah, is that a question more for the testing in terms of like security awareness training? Or
exactly.
phishing simulation?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, phishing simulation.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah, that's a really great question. So when it comes to that phishing simulation side, so Bullfish ID, we have customers or partners, I should say, across the board in many different industries. And what's nice about Bullfish is you have all of these pre-made kits that you can roll out to test your users, including students. Generally speaking, students, still get those types of emails of reset your password with whether it's Google or Office 365. So you have the ability to actually deploy this across all kinds of different industries, and you have the ability to even create your own custom kits if you wanted to do that. So it's extremely versatile.
I was about to close, and then I just have to ask this question because it's such a great question. And so I'll just ask you to answer it as quickly as possible. Michael is wondering if you can talk about, he says, many of the solutions I've seen make the user audience almost scared to check any email. Do you have any thoughts on how you bridge the difference between scared and smart? I love that.
That is a very good question. I think just me personally, let me put it this way, for me personally, from the training that I've done and what I've seen is it's not really about being scared, it's just about verifying, right, and being cautious. So one of the biggest things is instead of being scared of clicking on a link or something like that, it's just following up. You get an email from your CEO, maybe ping them and make sure that he did actually send that or she did actually send that. And so it's not really being scared. It's just being cautious and double checking. That's really what it is. It's just about slowing down and thinking before you move forward on those things.
And lastly, Jess, with a business email compromise averaging 4.2 million, that CEO would rather have, 4 or 5 emails come through in a month asking if that email is actually from them than having to, pay $4.2 million out. So
that's a great
that's
point.
a great point. And I'm going to stick around. I know Sammy's got to run, but I'll stick around. So if anyone has any other questions, tell them they can feel free to reach out to me, and I can try and help if I can. I don't have the solutions mind that Sammy does, but I'm here to help.
That's amazing.
I might be able to stick around a little bit as well, so all good.
Oh, perfect. Okay, great. Well, there we go. I love this on-the-fly live chat. So, Sammy, Miles, there's a bunch of questions for you in the folder, and the team can help you out with that. So keep those questions coming in, folks. And I know we're going to have to leave it there, but before you leave us, Miles, Sammy, if somebody's ready to dive in, wants to get started with Graphis, what is their first step?
First step would be, go ahead. Oh, sorry.
Go
You're
ahead.
both ready to go.
First thing is obviously if you're ready with Kaseya or Datto, is reach out to your account manager. Our website, graphis.ai, allows you to request a demo as well. And obviously you have our information here and you can feel free to reach out directly.
Yeah,
love that.
Grab
Okay.
one of the demos and we can, you'll actually maybe get Sammy. So there you go. I probably won't be there.
Never know.
there's your bonus incentive. More chatting with Sammy is always a good thing. And we did get a couple of high fives from the audience. Michael wants to let you know that he really appreciated the presentation, and I agree. It's been so much fun chatting with you both. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks so much, Jess.
All right, and thanks to everyone who clicked on the poll or asked a question. Again, keep those coming in because we've got Miles and Sammy hanging out a little bit longer on live chat, so take advantage of getting the opportunity to connect with those awesome humans and get those questions in. I'm also going to very quickly add to the awesomeness by giving away a prize. So $300 Amazon gift card. Now, I'll remind you quickly that you do need to be here live and present at the webinar in order to win. Our very first lucky winner with us here today is Jeff Fisher of Washington. Jeff Fisher of Washington, you have won a $300 Amazon gift card. Congratulations. As always, we will be in touch about claiming your prize after we wrap. Now, don't forget, there's still 2 more chances to win an Amazon gift card today, plus that best question card from each question, or each session, so keep those questions coming in. All right, but we are going to keep things moving along here at the EcoCast. Up next, it is my pleasure to introduce you to another awesome presenter here with us today, Tracy Attor, Inside Sales Engineer at Rubrik. Tracy, it is always such a pleasure to chat with you, and I'm so excited to hear more about what's up at Rubrik. I know we're going to dive into the platform a little bit, so the mic is all yours. Take it away, Tracy.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining today, and I am happy to be here. So my name is Tracy Attor, and I am one of the inside sales engineers covering the Bay Area and Rockies territory here in our mid-market segment. And my plan today is to go over some of those new and exciting things we announced, and of course hop into Polaris 2.0 to show it in the flesh. So without further ado, let's get started. So starting with Rubrik's core competency, pretty much, I'm going to lay the foundation out here. So what Rubrik does is we collapse what was once a traditionally complex legacy architecture into a single software fabric that scales out infinitely between on-prem and cloud environments. So the goal of Rubrik was to build a better, faster, less expensive backup and recovery platform with the cloud in mind starting from day one. When protecting on-prem workloads, we typically do position a 2U chassis with 4 blades in it. It's a hyperconverged appliance built on x86 architecture. Each blade inside the chassis does have CPU, it has memory, it has a 10 or 25 gig port for the data, optional 10 gigs for management. Each blade also has a hybrid disk architecture, so you will get SSDs for the performance and caching, which gets us up to 30,000 IOPS per appliance. And then you'll also get hard disk drives for the storage itself. And we could scale this all out by adding another chassis as you grow, should you need to expand your storage footprint. The way to think about it is it's similar to vSAN structure. So the more you add, the more of everything you get, because it's going to lock arms and be seen as one. So with that being said, there is no additional hardware shopping needed since the software, compute, and storage is all woven together. So it is a turnkey solution straight out of the box. And then from the inception of Rubrik, we've always put data security front and center. So this is evident in our immutable built from scratch append-only file system that we've paired with the zero trust architecture that we will get into a little bit more on my next slide. And then part of our innovation was to build data forensics into our platform. So you can do more with your backups, which we will also touch on in a moment because that's very important. And then our solution does hook into your environment using APIs, so we can easily integrate with VMware, Hyper-V, Nutanix, AHV, those hypervisors, or even SOAR or SIEM tools like Splunk, ServiceNow, etc. Or really any orchestration tools your security operations team is currently using for things like system event notifications or incident response. When it comes to recovery, again, we are leveraging those SSDs for the quickest performance. LiveMount is one of our most popular functions. That's where we could spin up a virtual machine on the Rubrik system itself. So we are leveraging Rubrik's own data stores to host that virtual machine, which we then give you the option after you've done what you needed to do to that second copy of the VM hosted on Rubrik. You can, do things like move it back into production in the least disruptive manner. And one of the use cases or test cases that I've seen using Liberty Mutual as an example, I believe it was a 14 terabytes database we were able to recover it in about 14 minutes using LiveMount after what had been 23 hours previously. And then most importantly, and the main reason customers are investing in these types of projects is our ability to recover and recover quickly. So we provide you with options here. I just mentioned one of them. You can do surgical, you could do granular recovery of just a few files, file level recovery. We do really well here. I love demoing that. And then of course, a bulk recovery or even automated orchestrated recovery at the application level as well. And then to help drive the point home here in summary of how secure we are starting day one. By the way, none of these features that you see here on the screen are a bolt-on. You don't have to shop for additional components. I'm going to keep saying that. And you also don't need additional licensing to add any of this in. These are all just standard features that come with every appliance when we protect your on-prem workloads. And then you could see we're pretty much a bunker in the box because of that. Our platform does run on top of a BSD distro of Linux, where we have stripped out what is not needed, and there's also no direct shell, just a command line interface to interact with the API itself. And then sitting at the core of who we are is our immutable append-only file system atlas, where all backups get written to locally, and it's not accessible or exposed through any off-the-shelf browsable protocols. So figure like NFS or SMB. It just essentially sits offline. So once backup data gets written to it, it cannot be modified, changed, or deleted by any bad actors. When it comes time to do any type of restore, replication, any operation taking place on top of that data needs to be authenticated through APIs and appropriate credentials, which is also verified by Atlas to ensure data integrity and something is what they say it is. And then touching more on zero trust methodology, we also enable end-to-end encryption, meaning all data is encrypted in flight using TLS 1.2 and at rest using AES-256-bit encryption. And then we also enable our users to set up multi-factor authentication, whether that's through RSA Secure ID, Duo, or anything SAML 2.0 compliant. We even have our own two-factor authentication built in where you can enable things like TOTP and challenge users for an authentication token using a secondary device or an authenticator app like Okta, Microsoft, or Google. If you're concerned about the backups themselves, getting into the wrong hands, I get this question a lot. Maybe it's a rogue admin, for example. You can turn on something called retention lock, which can prevent the premature deletion of snapshots from either malicious or accidental means. And then that actually requires quite a bit of human interaction between Rubrik support and at least 2 designated compliance contacts on your end. And then this is applied upon creating an SLA policy when you go to define how often you want to take snapshots and how long you want to keep them. And then you go and assign that to certain workloads. And then we also prevent NTP poisoning. So this is really unique. So that's where criminals are able to change or take control of the time source and then change the backup on the back end by adjusting the time in the platform, thinking it's, say 50 years ahead, which in turn will expire all the backup points. So there's very few technologies in the market space today that could prevent that. However, we do prevent that, and that was by way of implementing what's called a monotonic clock into our platform, which says not only do we not trust the time that the NTP server is giving us, but we'll also guarantee that the time will always move forward and not be impacted by variations leading to jumps in time. Its purpose is to count passage of time. In Rubrik's case, we're counting seconds, thus preventing expired backups through NTP poisoning. So that's pretty interesting. And then earlier this year at Forward, we did introduce a new concept here, and that is Rubrik Security Cloud. So this is our future, but our goal remains the same, and that is to ensure 2 things: no data lost and no ransom paid. For us, it's about protecting the enterprise through a hybrid approach. And then achieving that promise of zero trust security, it does require more than just infrastructure security because attacks are becoming, more targeted by the day. And then as it stands, currently backups are the highest priority for bad actors to target. So it's important to know that you need to protect your data at the very source, somehow, some way. So we have shifted our entire focus to combining backup and data security tools delivered as software as a service to complement traditional infrastructure security. So we can fully secure your critical applications in your business. And for us, It's about achieving data resilience, data observability, and most importantly, data recoverability here. So with those three things in place by Rubrik standards, you get, first and foremost, data resiliency guaranteed. So you will always have a clean copy of your backups that can never be compromised thanks to our immutable file system, Atlas, which we just talked about. And it's important to know, to this day, we have never been compromised at that layer, making this definitely a unique differentiator in the market, our Atlas file system. We also introduced earlier this year Rubrik Cloud Bolt, which we co-engineered directly with Microsoft to provide a fully managed Rubrik service built on Azure Cool or Azure Archive for customers that want to archive their data short-term or long-term. And then the data is also completely isolated since it's put into our own tenant. So that's all fully secure, managed by us here at Rubrik. There's also predictable costs as well, which covers storage, reads, API calls, and egress charges. And then, of course, we could protect your M365 environment in a similar fashion. Whether that's Exchange users, OneDrive, SharePoint, and Teams, this data has obviously become a huge target for bad actors. I believe Mandiant, that popular computer security firm, they have even gone out and said that 365 is a gold mine for ransomware groups because most organizations, they tend to hold a lot of business critical and confidential data in their M365 footprints. All right, so when it comes to Rubrik's data observability, that pillar right there in the middle, we do give you the ability to find and understand the blast radius of a ransomware attack, also known as anomalous event detection. So you can narrow down exactly what has been encrypted and what needs to be recovered, which in an event like this can save you from a ton of downtime. And most importantly, you never have to go Bitcoin shopping again. You'll also know if any sensitive data was in scope, leveraging our sensitive data discovery tool, formerly known as Sonar. And that's often required by cyber insurance and compliance standards. And then finally, you'll have incident containment, where you may have heard it out in the wild as threat hunting here at Rubrik. So that will give you the ability to roll back to the last known good state without concern of reinfection, right? So we can narrow down which snapshots are in their last known clean state before exfiltration began. So essentially, you're not stuck running malware labs, and that's pretty nice. Then finally, that last pillar, that's just stating the obvious, data recovery. That's simple, right? It's critical. And with Rubrik, you'll have those options, right? So lastly, and then we'll launch into that Polaris 2.0 tour. So those further along in their cloud journey, we provide Rubrik native tools to back up and recover workloads in the cloud because we want to simplify the way that you manage those backups. We support very complex multi-cloud workloads through that same single pane of glass approach, just as your other workloads you protect on-prem through Polaris. Those workloads being Azure VMs, EC2 instances, RDS, EBS databases, or file servers that live across Azure, AWS, or GCP. Our solution here, it aims to address the fact that after our customers have gone through their lift and shift, or they've built things cloud native, they want to make sure that they could provide that same level of governance and security they once had on-prem, and we could solve that. So from a configuration perspective, there's absolutely no running resources here like on-prem hardware. All we're doing is connecting via an API to assume a role from our Rubrik account with specific conditions to use this role with some modifications based on the cloud provider. For scalable protection, we offer the ability to create a policy that spans hundreds or thousands of resources in the cloud by simply telling it what kind of RPO and RTO you want. And then this could span all your cloud workloads if you want to by resource groups, tag rules, maybe you want to protect entire accounts, subscriptions, or maybe you want to, take a more granular specific approach by maybe just an Azure VM here and there, or an EC2 instance, or many EC2 instances, EBS volumes, etc. You set that policy up, and this software will handle the entire backup and recovery process. In terms of security, we can leverage things like storage tiering into immutable storage for Azure Storage blobs, which you configure within your Azure portal. For AWS, we have object level immutability on our roadmap for the second half of this year. Our AWS customers today air gap leveraging cross-account replication with us, which is highly recommended. So you have an air-gapped copy of your data. Again, we could help you orchestrate that. And then from a usability standpoint, we purposely developed a no-brainer approach. So we have a point-and-click multi-cloud dashboard experience that the operator can go into. You could derive reporting from, have visibility in a way that native tooling from, a cloud provider that you might be leveraging today, they cannot do this across different clouds. So we could solve that as well. All right. So it looks like I have a little time left, so I'll launch into Polaris.io and give you that quick tour I've been talking about. So give me a minute. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen real quick and hop over there. Perfect. Here it is. All right. And here we go. Now we can get started. All right. So new look and feel, or at least to those that may have saw Polaris 1.0 previously. So we've obviously made a couple changes here. So new look, it's blue, which I find easier on my eyes, to be honest with you. If for whatever reason you want to switch back to bright theme, you can. That is also an option. But nope, starting at this global dashboard page, you could still see off the bat a consolidated view for monitoring activities across your Rubrik appliances and where they might live across data centers across the globe. You could also see all your protected objects on-prem and in the cloud down here. Whoops. And then you get full visibility into any task running and compliance and events overview from an SLA perspective. Over here to the right, you can see ransomware investigation. That's all formerly known as radar. Currently, it's alerting me to one anomalous event right here on my global dashboard page. Data discovery, that's formerly known as sonar. So going into that tool, you're gonna, be able to leverage what's called a predefined template, or you could maybe customize your own dictionaries or expressions into an analyzer. So you could go out and search for things that might put you at risk, right? So personal identifying information as it relates to like your customers or maybe even you, anything HIPAA, GDPR, GLBA, that tool will go out and report back what it may have found out in the wild and give you a chance to clean those up before either an unexpected audit maybe or even a ransomware event. And then going into, let's go into the gear settings. I like to talk about some of the security stuff that you could do in here. So there is a couple things you could do from a login perspective. So we could enable things like SSO. So you could establish the SAML 2.0 connection with an identity provider like Okta, Microsoft, and Google using those authenticators. You could also leverage IP whitelisting, which allows Rubrik to limit access to the Rubrik console to just trusted IP addresses or IP ranges. And you can enable multi-factor authentication where you would need, the help of a second device like your smartphone to generate a one-time passcode to authenticate yourself for another user, again, through an identity provider like Okta, Microsoft, and Google authenticators. Those are the popular three that we support. And then going into what we do protect here in Polaris, this is pretty fun. So I have my inventory tab up here. Everything data center is going to be everything on-prem. So if I click into that, you could see I have my vSphere card, my Hyper-V, Nutanix, Linux, Windows file sets, volumes, things like that. You can see what's currently protected out of what's maybe remaining, or sorry, it means 101 virtual machines, but only 47 of those are protected, meaning I have active SLA domains assigned to 47 of those virtual machines. What's also cool about this inventory thing at the top, it's also here as well, but I like to go up here. If I go to SaaS, this is where you could find my M365 tile. So you could see I am protecting a number of things: Exchange, OneDrive, SharePoint, Teams. I got my users being protected here, all their mailboxes, OneDrive, files and folders, or entire OneDrives across users. I got SharePoint. SharePoint tends to be really popular amongst the people that I talk to. So you can see I have a number of site collections here in my demo lab. If I go into legal, you could see that we do backup document libraries. We could back up list. Going back to Exchange, sorry, I glossed over that. We can protect entire mailboxes, and we get pretty granular here. I actually type in Tracy. Let's just pretend for a minute, I clicked on a link that I shouldn't have. Please restore my entire mailbox, or maybe I lost a few emails. It's real simple how we do this. I have this snapshot here. I click recover, highlight mailbox. I can recover Tracy's entire mailbox, whereas Microsoft might take a week to give you a snapshot, a point in time to recover from. We did that in a couple clicks. And here's where we get more granular. Here's all of her emails. We only click metadata ever. You don't actually have, access to the full content there. And you could search for individual emails by using a keyword in the subject line. And then you could select which emails you want to restore. And here's those options. Back to the original user or restore to another user. So that's M365. And then lastly, I talked about the fact that we do protect cloud native workloads. So here are my EC2 instances, my Azure SQL databases, my Azure VMs, GCP down here. There are those cards. And that is that. If you are interested in a full demo, you probably know where to find us to set that up. You could also visit rubric.com, or you could contact your local value-added reseller or anybody that you might work with in that sense, and they could get you set up on a more in-depth demo into this. But for now, that was the sizzle demo. Actually, this is just the tour. And yeah, thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to answering some questions.
Well, thank you, Tracy, for that awesome presentation and for sticking around to answer some questions. I have to say, I love the new look. It's great. Very, very soothing, the blue.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a big favorite feature that I'm hearing a lot compared to our Polaris 1.0.
Well, I appreciate that, and the demo was awesome. We do have some great questions coming in, so are you ready to jump in?
I am.
I wanted to start. So Deb sent a question in, and she is a regular of ours. She works in higher education, so she's often kind of looking in that field. She was wondering about free trials and whether or not that would be possible. Is that something that, is there a way people can try, especially the M365 solution?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's actually really simple to get started. So if they head on over to like rubric.com, you'll see like a magnifying glass to do a search. You can literally search M365 free trial there. And we offer that free for 30 days. So if they like it, it's a seamless transition from PO to production. And then you could keep what you already have backed up during that trial, which is nice. So yeah, that's really easy to get started on, no problem.
I love that. Okay, Deb, there's your answer. Your students will get a chance to try it out. Okay, you know what? I have to say, I love the word threat hunting. I don't know why, but that is just very evocative for me. So I like that idea. So you mentioned incident containment and threat hunting. How are you actually looking for those threats?
Yeah, so we have a few indicators that can be used for the hunt. I love that too, threat hunting. So you can leverage, things like Yara rules. I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with that, but that is one of the most popular methods for this. So just to kind of like deep dive into that. So that is the standard definition used to identify malware using scripts that look for those indicators. Those scripts look specifically at strings inside the file itself that exists within ransomware. If you currently have a third-party security intelligence team, some customers out there may already have access to this type of threat intelligence, whether that's CrowdStrike or whomever in that space. But what that will tell you is what the trend is this week or today, what that looks like. So maybe it's Lockbit Trojan making its rounds, maybe it's Ryuk malware, guaranteed file hash values or Yara rules already exist for you somewhere for you to use during a threat hunt. And then I've also seen independent security researchers on the internet make these available to the public as well. So you take those, you put it into our tool, we'll go out and look for those indicators depending on where it's coming from.
Interesting. Yeah, and so Joseph chimed in here. He said his experience with threat hunting is that he's found that it's looking for different rather than bad. Would you agree with that?
Correct, yeah. And then there's also a couple other things that you could leverage too that I should mention. So we could also do file hashes, so specific hash values inside the file, or you can look for file patterns, which are just the specific file paths to search for the malware. Maybe it's .ryuk, .conti, whatever the cyber criminals are using in this day and age. We could do that too.
That's interesting. Okay. I want to ask this because Chris is wondering if you could repeat your email address. He didn't catch it.
Sure. So it's my name, Tracy, Tracy, dot Ator, Ator, @rubric.com.
And just because this was also asked, and I think you touched on it briefly, Matt was wondering about if they do decide to do a free trial and then end up not going with the solution, which I think you'll find that you'll stay. But if you do go in a different direction, they want to make sure they wouldn't leave anything behind. I think you mentioned that they would be able to keep that after they left the trial. Is that correct?
So if they decide to actually sign up and push this, into production and pay for it, that is all seamless. You don't have to jumpstart the solution itself. Yeah, you just keep the backups and continue on. If you plan on not continuing the trial or not paying for it, then we do delete your data after about 30 days.
Okay, so you have some time. It's not like the instant
to change your mind, hopefully.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, or you could contact support, and I think they have a way to remove that even sooner if needed. So
perfect. I mean, one conversation with you, and I'm sure they'll all be sold. I wish that we could keep going. I do want to ask you, just because I think you mentioned forward, and I think this is a great sort of place to end it. We did have a question that at forward there had been something mentioned about a command center. Is that available yet?
Yeah, so that has been coming up a lot since Forward. I'm glad you asked. So we anticipate this to come with our summer 8.0 release, and then of course that might be a moving target. But I'm very excited for this myself, and I'm actually bummed I didn't have access to actually show this today. But for those who are new to this, it's basically a dashboard that will give you insights and scoring for how well your backups are secure from ransomware, along with security recommendations to up your rating scale. So it begs the question, am I good or am I not? So, for example, we may make a recommendation for you to enable POCP, which is time-based one-time passwords for Polaris, which will essentially have a 35% score impact. And then you'll also be able to drill deeper to see past 7 days or maybe 12 months to see how, the security of your Rubric platform has transitioned over time. So that's all good stuff. Stay tuned for that. I'm very excited for that.
I love that. It's always great when the presenter's excited, it's good stuff. So stay tuned. And Tracy, I wish we could keep going there. We do have a lot of amazing questions, so I want to assure everyone in the audience that we will make sure Tracy and the Rubric team do get to see those questions, so you will get follow-ups on those. And Tracy, before we leave, for the person that's ready to jump in with Rubric, they're pumped about that free trial. What's their first step?
Yeah, so like I said, you could visit rubric.com and go ahead and fill out that form once you search for, that trial that you're looking for, whether it's M365, maybe it's the cloud native protection. Or you could reach out to your value-added reseller, whether that's CDW, SHI, or anybody you use local. That's fine too. And then you could also contact me directly, and I'll put you in touch with the right team. So you have 3 options.
I love that. Tracy, again, thank you so much for an amazing presentation and demo and sticking around to answer some questions. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
All right, and you can see that we've got that pull up for you all. What additional information would you like to get about the Rubric solution? So again, making your life easy, click on the poll right now and let Rubric know how they can follow up with you. I know there were a lot of questions and we got to a few of them, and there's lots more that we didn't get to. As I mentioned, those will go to the Rubric team, but another great way that you can get some answers to those questions is just by clicking on this poll here. Now, while you're doing that, I'm also going to remind you to head on over to the Handouts tab if you haven't been over there in a little bit. Make sure that you click on the Rubric link and get the ebook from Rubric called Becoming Unstoppable Against Ransomware, How Real-Life Heroes Are Harnessing the Power of Zero Trust Security. How cool is that? So you want to read more. You know that title grabbed your attention and you're just itching to read it. So make sure that you snag that. It's kind of set up like a slide deck. It's an ebook slide deck. So go download that, save that for later, and learn all about harnessing that power. Okay, last seconds to click on the poll here, and then I'm going to move things right along. So run back to your computer if you walked away for coffee. Click, click, click. And moving forward. Okay. Up next, I am so very excited to introduce you all to the very next presenter from an awesome crew, and that is, of course, Josh Green, who is the technical marketing engineer at Duo Security. Josh, thank you so much for being here with us today at the EcoCast. I cannot wait to hear all the cool stuff you have lined up for us. So take it away, Josh.
Great, thanks so much. Just want to confirm you can hear me all right?
I got you loud and clear.
Perfect. So we're going to talk about a topic today that no one will be brand new to, and that is, talking about how the reality of the world we live in and the IT security world is that the weakness is us in so many ways, right? We know that there are vulnerabilities in systems. We know that attackers take advantage of them all the time. But at the end of the day, one of the most reliable vulnerabilities, and the one that unfortunately we will never be able to fully patch, is the human being. And there are so many different ways in which we can be taken advantage of, from the convincing email to the deal that sounds too good to be true. And the reality is, one of the things we have to do is not just protect our systems, but also try to engineer them to understand that there are human weaknesses we also need to protect from. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how Zero Trust can help to save us from ourselves. So if you've been watching the news over the last 6 to 8 months, you will have heard that there has just been an absolute surge in successful phishing attacks. And if you haven't been looking at it that closely, you might wonder, well, geez, that's been around for such a long time. What's new? What's different? Why is this so successful despite the fact that we've invested so much in stopping it? And the problem is that about, I guess, almost 5-6 months ago now, attackers found a nice, new, interesting way to defeat us, and it was our patience. And what they discovered was that in the old days, as we well know, it was very easy to get into somebody's system if you simply convinced them to hand over their credentials, username and password. We could do that with, again, a convincing email with some sense of urgency, and that would be enough. And once you had the username and password, you could get access to somebody's system. And I have this sort of silly slide here that sort of says, are you vulnerable to that? Do you have any users? Yes. Do they access any systems? Yes. Then you're vulnerable, right? And if your answer was no to either of those questions, I'd kind of turn my head to the side and go, really? Are you sure? Because we're all vulnerable to it. And the really scary statistic that comes out around that is that, generally speaking, when they evaluate how quickly you can be breached by a phishing attack, what they discovered was that if somebody in your organization was going to be convinced to click on an email of a malicious nature, they would very often do it within the first 5 minutes of that email arriving in your organization. Right? So not only are we vulnerable, but we're vulnerable very, very quickly. And so what we saw was, bait like this, a convincing email with a sense of urgency, or the imitation of a well-recognized web page from somebody like Apple. We even saw text messages, right? We'd see, I actually just got one yesterday telling me that my Apple ID had been deactivated, and that to get access back to my Apple ID, I needed to go to activate.appleid.com, which of course is a completely fake address. But even for the non-savvy, how would you know that that's not the legitimate address? You wouldn't, right? And so people get tricked by that. I even get, you see these voice phishes. I've gotten a phone call from someone claiming to be the National Crime Agency, telling me that the police are on their way to my house because I've been found guilty of tax evasion. And my only hope is to cooperate with them on the phone. Some of these, for folks, especially the elderly, right, that's very convincing. And so they meet with a lot of success. And so one of the things we've done in the corporate world to try to defend against this is to implement multi-factor authentication, so that the piece of information is not sufficient anymore for an attacker to gain access to critical systems. And one of the best ways that we've done that in recent years is using push notifications, such that you must be in possession of a separate device in order to grant access to the system. And if the attacker doesn't have that device, in theory, they were out of luck. But what they discovered about 6 months ago was that if they were to send you push notifications for multi-factor, because they've, in theory, compromised your credentials already, if they were to send you push notifications at a sufficient rate, repetitively, in short order, most people have a line at which they will simply cave and go, I want my phone to stop buzzing in my pocket. I will do anything to make it stop. I'll click approve. And that's it. The MFA is defeated if you have nothing else. And so they engineered, essentially socially, this way of getting into systems that were protected by MFA, even if that MFA solution itself had no technical vulnerabilities, no 0 days, no open backdoors or anything like that. The weakness was us. Users will do anything to make it stop. And of course, the moment they make it stop, the world also ends for the company because they've potentially given away really serious access. And of course, that they can follow that up with more traditional types of impersonation to get more information out of a user. And one of the other things that's really been very interesting to watch since the beginning of the year is how AI has affected all of this. Because in the old days, those emails I showed you, those fake web pages I showed you, someone would have to take some time and sit down and craft those, right? You'd have to write an email that looks just convincing enough to get the real gullible folks, but not so convincing that it got reported by the really savvy folks. And you'd have to think about that. And of course, if you wanted to capture details from them using a login to a fake bank web page, you needed some coders available who could write you some code for that web page to make it look like a convincing clone. But what we've seen since January on top of the push phishing is this explosion in use of ChatGPT, which if you haven't encountered it before, it's a generative AI, meaning it has access to massive amounts of text from all over the internet, and it uses that to create really well-written pieces of text of its own. And if you haven't played with it, it's absolutely free for personal use. You should absolutely try it out just to get an idea of what's coming in the future. But suffice it to say that you can, with a very simple prompt like we see on the screen there, have it write a convincing phishing email for you, complete with little bracketed text that tells you where to include your malicious link and where to sign your name, of course. And of course, that's done in 5-10 seconds for you, ready to go. And you might say, well, okay, but we still need the coders that might use this, to create that fake web page. But in fact, unfortunately, you would be wrong there as well, because ChatGPT is capable of writing code in a number of different prevalent languages, anything from HTML to Python to C Sharp to C++ to Java. And in fact, if we ask it to say, give me a sample web page that looks like a bank, this is what we get. Now, is that code completely ready to go up on the web and be used right now? Not quite, but it's a heck of a launching off point for someone who's maliciously minded and who wants to launch an attack. It really lowers the bar to entry. And so you've got a perfect storm now of a lowered barrier to entry, easier to launch the attack, and easier to complete the attack because they've discovered essentially a human weakness they can exploit should they encounter multiple factors of authentication that they can use to sort of worm their way into an organization. And so as a result, we've seen this huge uptick in phishing attacks that goes above and beyond what was already a relatively high number of attacks in the background anyway. And what do I mean by that? Well, identity theft still continues to be the #1 cause of breaches for users and the initial point for larger attacks that end up perhaps pivoting around an organization. And, about 5 years ago, it was actually over 90% of attacks started that way. And we would have said up until, the beginning of this year that we'd made huge progress making a dent in that with multi-factor authentication because it was down in the 60s. Now, that's still a preponderance of the attacks, but we'd made great progress. And unfortunately, a lot of that progress has been rolled back as a result of these new attacks. And it's costing us a lot of money, not just in dealing with malicious incidences where credentials and passwords are compromised, but just the typical day-to-day interfacing with passwords, onboarding users, offboarding users, help desk calls for resetting passwords that someone forgot. The estimates that were touted at Gartner IAM last week were varied between 20 and 30% of, depending on who you ask, 20 and 30% of help desk calls relate just to password resets for forgotten passwords, right? So it costs a huge amount of money to begin with, even when nothing's going wrong. And we also rely on identity systems that sort of have this single point of failure, right? If you get access to my identity system and you can create accounts, delete accounts, change permissions, it's a single point of failure because that's my jumping off point into most other corporate applications, right? If I can get access to a service account with high level privileges, I'm set. Off I go. I just go find the system I'm looking to target and exfiltrate or damage the data I want to damage or steal. So what we really need to realize is that paradigm needs to shift, and we're starting to see that shift. And it's best diagrammed very simply this way. In the beginning, right, identity was, in a digital sense, two things that you knew, right, a username and a password. And the problem there is somewhat obvious to us nowadays, that obviously if anyone else knows those things too, they can impersonate you. So it evolved into something you knew and something you had. And that was a huge improvement until the age of push phishing. But even before that, the other challenge you have with using devices for part of the authentication flow is that you also need to establish the trustworthiness of the device. Because if that MFA device, unbeknownst to us, were jailbroken or rooted, had remote access on it, maybe it downloaded a malicious app from the Google Play Store and was actually under the remote control of an attacker on the other side of the world, how trustworthy is it as an authentication factor? Just by clicking a green button? Not very trustworthy, right? And so now we see this third stage of evolution that's been going on for a while, but it's starting to reach a level of maturity that even consumers are starting to see it from things like their banks, where first thing we want to do is establish that you're using a trustworthy device, right? Use risk-based and behavioral analytics and even device management where appropriate to establish that the device that we're dealing with is trustworthy and a trusted managed device. And then we want to combine that with something that you are, right? That could be a biometric, it could be facial recognition, and as we'll talk about in a bit more detail in a minute, it could even be a PIN, and we'll talk about why that's actually still better than a password in a few minutes. But when you combine those two things, you sort of have a hybrid identity where the user and the device must be together. We have now a very high level of confidence in the identity of the user beyond a password, because it's something that they have with them and something that they are. And we have a device that we know to be trustworthy that needs to be essentially co-located with that user in order to be valid for authentication. Now, the next thing we want to do is discuss how do we do that and make it user-friendly. And you might think from a security perspective, why the heck does that matter all that much? I mean, sure, we don't want a user experience to be awful if it doesn't have to be, but my gosh, we're willing to sacrifice user experience on the altar of security if we have to. And my message when I talk to people in industry and to customers is that's absolutely the wrong way to think about it. And unfortunately, that comes down to, again, that the weakness is not that security per se, it's us, right? We just talked about the fact that users are willing to do anything to make those vibrating push notification messages stop in their pocket, right? Well, the same is true if we add too much friction to the authentication process, no matter how secure it is. What we find is we generate the problem of shadow IT. If the work tools that the user is supposed to use are too difficult to access, too confusing, too annoying, and there's some equivalent consumer tool out there that they can use, they'll go use it. And then all of our protections and all of our security goes right out the window, right? They may not be able to access certain systems without going through our security, but if it comes to storing sensitive data in the approved corporate application versus a copy of a sheet on Google Drive, they're going to use Google Drive, right? And that happens to the best of us. That's even happened to us at Cisco, where people have been found to be doing things they weren't supposed to be doing and potentially storing data in places they shouldn't do. And the lesson that teaches us is that user experience is not optional. The only way to truly stamp out shadow IT is to have the corporate approved experience to be at least as easy as everything else out there, so that there's really no incentive to go anywhere else, right? Imagine that my corporate login flow is I come to the application I want to use, I look at my camera, I'm authenticated, and I'm in. Whereas to go to Google Drive, I have to go username, password, I have to get a code from Google Authenticator that I signed up for ahead of time, and I have to type that in. Why on earth am I going to do that if I could just look at my camera and use my secure, work-approved tool? I'm not going to do that. And so what we want to do here is use behavioral analytics and risk-based authentication to dial up or down our approach and our friction according to the risk level we perceive, such that when we see a user on a device they use every day, in the location that they are doing it from every day, using an application that they use all the time, and not fitting any known attack patterns, weird connections coming from other parts of the world we don't expect the user to be in, then we actually don't need to challenge that user for authentication very often at all. Right? We can actually move away from this sort of fixed session length that has been the mainstay of security challenges for years, where we want to make sure we're authenticating you every 4 or 8 hours because that's our only opportunity to sort of challenge you and make sure that you are who you say you are, because authenticating you is the only signal we get in that respect. In the world of today, by contrast, we can look at lots of things, and as a result, one, if you are the user, if you are doing something malicious, right, if there's a known attack pattern or something seems odd, we don't want to wait 4 or 8 hours to challenge you. We want to challenge you now, right? That's where we want to step in and intervene. And by contrast, if the user's doing, like I said before, all the things we would expect them to do on a daily basis from the location we would expect, then there's no need to challenge them, even at 8 hours, right? We just get out of the way, right? Reduce the friction as much as possible and leave the user alone until something changes, at which point we would want to react. And the other thing that users are increasingly cognizant of and careful about is how their privacy is protected. And so, when we say here we want to do a Wi-Fi fingerprint, we want to know the user's location, right, as part of these risk signal analysis that we're doing. We want to think very careful about how we do that, right? Most devices today have location services built in. We could turn on the GPS, we could pinpoint your location, and we could know, and we could even record, what's a normal location for you, what's an abnormal location for you, are you in a normal location, are you somewhere we've never seen before, and we would be able to very quickly identify that an attacker on the other side of the world was trying to access your account. Well, the problem with that is we would also know everywhere you go and everything you do, and we would have a database of that such that if an attacker were to breach us, they would have all that information too. And the New York Times did a story back in 2018 where they were given a set of completely anonymized metadata of user locations around the Washington area, and I think the New York area as well. And based on just following, where that phone was in the middle of the night, where that phone was in the middle of the day, where that phone was at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, they were able to figure out where people lived, where people worked, which ones were in therapy, because at 5 in the afternoon they were at a psychologist's office on Google Maps. They found people having affairs. They found people working in the intelligence community. And so, in fact, this anonymized data is actually really not that anonymous, and it's really dangerous. So we wanted to come up with a way to do this that was a lot less, for lack of a better word, creepy and at best, and dangerous at worst. And the solution we arrived at was this Wi-Fi fingerprinting solution that we actually have a patent pending on, that what it essentially does is it takes, in the same way that when you put your fingerprint on a biometric reader, right, your fingerprint isn't recorded as an image and stored, isn't sent anywhere and stored. Instead, a hash of it is generated that only your fingerprint can regenerate. And in this sense, we were like, well, why don't we apply that to Wi-Fi fingerprint, to Wi-Fi location? And as a result, we called it a fingerprint, where your device can look out at all the networks around you and create a hash based on those network names and combined with the unique identifier of your device. And what that does is it does two things. Number one, only that pattern of Wi-Fi networks around you will produce the same hash again. But by also combining your unique device identifier, even another device in the very same location won't produce the same hash as your device does. And that hash doesn't tell us anything about where you are. We don't have to store the names of the Wi-Fi networks. All we need to know is that if you move to a different location and we see a different set of Wi-Fi networks around you, that produces a different hash. And as a result, we know you've moved. And we may decide that added into all the other risk signals around you demonstrates that there's perhaps a higher risk, and perhaps we may want to challenge you for a new authentication as a result. So now how do we do that without becoming too annoying? Well, the emergency stopgap measure for users who are needing to use push-based authentication is to do something that we call verified push, where on the left-hand side you'll see that the normal interaction with the multi-factor authentication app that many, many different companies use is a green button or a red button, approve or deny. Well, if we think that there's a little bit more risk, what we want to do is dynamically turn on this situation where the web page presents a code that the user must type into their phone. And what that does is it air gaps the process in a way, because the attacker who may have compromised your credentials and started the login process on the computer will have the code. But the user who's being bombarded by 100 push notifications and just wants to make them stop, well, they can't enter the code because they don't have the code, right? It's not being presented to them. As a result, their only option to make the authentication stop is to click the deny button and confirm to the IT security team that a fraudulent authentication is in progress. And what we can do from there is mute on our end any of the further notifications. The user doesn't get bothered anymore, right? And then, say 10 minutes later, they decide, hey, I have to log into something. It really is me. Well, then they will have the code, and they can type the code into the application and restore their level of trustworthiness. And I'll give you a closer look at what that looks like. We allow you to customize the length of the code, and we allow you to customize sort of what are the applications you want to apply that to, because for non-sensitive things, perhaps you never want to escalate to this step. But the idea there is to air gap that process, and most importantly, not to do it all the time, right? If you were to have to type a code every single time you logged in all the time, that's a miserable, high-friction user experience. On the other hand, if you know that you're only going to see this when we've already identified that something risky and unusual is going on, then one, you probably won't mind entering the code once, but two, you're also more likely to be suspicious of the login prompt, and you might say, you know what, that wasn't me. Something seems fraudulent, and report it to IT security. So that's a great stopgap measure. It defeats these attacks very, very quickly if you deploy it, and it minimizes the amount of user friction to some extent, because we only want to present it to you when we need to. However, where we'd really like to get to, and where the industry as a whole is moving very quickly, is passwordless, whereby we're taking that device information we've been talking about all along here, and we're adding something like a biometric or even a PIN to verify that you are in possession of the trusted device in a way that an attacker cannot leverage. So, two things need to happen for that to work. One, the passwordless authentication itself cannot be triggered remotely, meaning an attacker somewhere else cannot trigger anything on your device that allows you to do biometric authentication or PIN-based authentication. It has to be initiated on the machine where that identity lives. And the other thing that needs to be in place, of course, is that the device has to have some capability of storing key material securely. And that's done using what's either called a hardware security module, or a trusted platform module, or a secure enclave in Apple parlance. They're all referring to the same thing, which is essentially a piece of hardware in the device that's separate from the operating system, where keys can be stored securely, such that we can have confidence that no one can export them somewhere else. And that actually is extremely common these days. As of 2022, we saw that 65.2% of devices, 65.2% of our customers had already enabled one of the standards that relies on this technology in their accounts, and we actually see that almost 81% of mobile devices have biometrics configured and enabled at this point. So it's a massive percent of the market at this point. And any computer, any Windows computer since 2016, in order to be considered a Microsoft Windows certified device, must include this hardware as well. And so that means there's a pretty large install base out there of devices capable of doing this kind of authentication. And the reason I said we would talk about this later, and the time is now, even a PIN is better than a password. And the reason is the way that it changes the threat model. So if I have a password, I need to send it somewhere. Now, I may protect it by hashing it. I may wrap that in a layer of encryption and tunnel that to an account. But at the end of the day, I'm sending it across a wire or across the air. The application I'm sending it to needs a copy of that hash so that it can compare it to what I send. And so I'm vulnerable to phishing attacks. It's vulnerable to attacks on the wire to steal it in transit and then replay it. It's vulnerable to attacks on the target application who have a copy of that password, right? And so there's at least 3 different ways an attacker can breach me. By contrast, a PIN in this passwordless web authentication standard, WebAuthn, is used to merely unlock a key. That key is an asymmetric key pair that's been generated during the registration of that user when they were onboarded to the application or to the organization. The organization gets copy of the public key of that user, but the private key never leaves that hardware security module. And the PIN or the fingerprint or the Face ID are a local-only method to unlock that private key and use it to sign messages. Again, the key is never transmitted, only the signature of what the user is trying to send is sent across the wire. And so whether it's a biometric or a face or a PIN, without the key that's been securely stored in the device, an attacker cannot leverage that identity. You could absolutely send an attacker on the other side of the world your passwordless PIN, and they couldn't use it because they would be unlocking a vault that had nothing in it, right? And so that's why we sort of say go passwordless whenever and wherever you can, because what's the user experience if you can do this? Well, now, instead of having to do a username and a password and multi-factor authentication and potentially even an extra verification code, my experience could be as simple as I tried to access an application, I was looking at my screen at the time, I was logged in. One-step authentication, and in the background, we're doing multiple factors, right? We're looking at the device, we're looking at the behavior, we're looking at the Wi-Fi fingerprint, we're verifying the signature of the key. We're doing tons and tons of factors, but the user doesn't have to see any of them. And that's the real beauty of it, because now we've got the added security, and the friction level is so low, except when absolutely necessary, that the user isn't going to want to go and use some third-party consumer tool that doesn't support this kind of technology yet. In fact, their work tool will be easier to use than the alternative. And so we defeat the attack weakness against anything technical, and we also defeat the weakness within us that might lead us to do something we shouldn't do because it simply makes our lives easier. And of course, we want to log all this information. We want to provide you with information about why a user is trusted, why a user might have been put into a less trusted status, where did they come from, what did we see, what were the behavioral patterns that looked weird to us, so that you can also analyze that. And essentially, at the end of it, the magic is that by doing all of this stuff in the background, making it risk-based, making it web authentication-based, we enable seamless secure access. And what it really allows us to do is that in most cases, because the majority of our authentications are not attacks, they're legitimate authentications by users looking to do legitimate things, it really lets us get out of the way and let users do their jobs. And the help desk phone calls to reset your passwords, they just go away. Right? We want to continuously assess risk and trust to enable seamless, secure access. And with that, I'll stop there, and I will say thank you and open it up to any questions we have.
Yeah, thank you so much, Josh. That was such an interesting presentation and really fun to dig into. Unfortunately, we are very close to time, so I'm not going to be able to ask you any questions, but if you have the time to stick around on live chat, there are a lot of questions waiting for you in the folder, and as I said, we will make sure that we get everything on over to the Duo team. But before you do leave us, Josh, for somebody out there that is really excited, wants to jump in right away, what would you recommend as that first step to getting started?
Sure. Well, I think the easiest step, if you're running a relatively modern set of applications and hardware, the easiest thing to do, especially if you're already doing MFA with Duo, is actually what you may not realize is you have passwordless now. Turning it on in your estate, tick box. You literally tick it, and you're done. And it therefore takes about 5 minutes really to turn on. If you're not doing MFA, or if you're doing MFA that doesn't have any enhanced option to air gap the process to delete these push phishing attacks, you urgently need to start thinking about that, because unfortunately the attackers have found a weakness in solutions that can't step up their authentication in that way. But also equally, you need to consider that if you have a solution that can do that step-up authentication, but it's either always on or always off, that presents a risk in and of itself, because if it's always on and the users hate it, you open up a whole risk of shadow IT. So those are things I would just keep in mind.
I think that's great feedback, great takeaways for the audience out there, and I really want to thank you, Josh, for coming and answering a question, and hopefully we can get to a few more on live chat. You got a couple of high fives from the audience out there. I know you definitely resonated and hit some chords, so thank you again. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you.
My pleasure, and I'll go take a look into the chat there for a few minutes, and then unfortunately I will have to run myself as well.
Perfect. We'll get as many answers as we can. Thanks, Josh.
Thanks.
All right, and thanks to all of you out there for taking some time to answer that poll. And again, I'm still seeing those high fives come in from the audience. I love that. I'm so glad that you guys are getting things out of these presentations. That is, of course, why we are all here today, is to learn and to chat with these fascinating experts. Speaking of fascinating experts, we have another one on deck. So I'm going to move things along. I'm just giving you the absolute last chance to click on that poll there. All right. And moving forward. Oh, and I'm so sorry, now that I've jumped forward, I do need to remind you all to head on over to the Handouts tab. Make sure you get that Duo handout. It's reviewing the anatomy of a phishing attack. This is a really interesting look at the rise of phishing, identifying security gaps that are allowing the room for these attacks to take place, what the attacks actually look like, trends you should be looking for. So lots of cool resources there. So anyways, please do head on over to that Handouts tab and make sure you grab that before we wrap. As I said, though, we're going to move things along because we have another incredible expert here with us on the EcoCast. We're going to be chatting with Tanya Dudley, VP and CISO at Cofense. Tanya, thank you so much for being here with us at the EcoCast today. I know you have some fascinating content lined up for us. I can't wait. So the platform is all yours.
Thank you, and how great that I went after how you can protect yourself against the things that I'm going to talk to you about. So yes, Tanya Dudley, I'm going to go over the phishing threat landscape of what we see today here at Cofense. And just real quick, who Cofense is. So we've been in this industry of stopping email threats for over 10 years. So our co-founders, Rohat Balani and Aaron Higby, really pioneered the whole element of phishing simulation as a methodology for training. But it didn't take long before they realized that there's more to that than just simulating that, right? There's the real thing, and how do you get users to do the right thing when it comes to once they've identified something looks bad. Over 800 million individual simulations that we've run. We only create our templates based on real phishing threats. Because we feel that there is great value in showing your users what it is they're actually going to land in their inbox, right? It doesn't really do any good to waste their time with things that your SEGs are probably doing a pretty good job of blocking when it comes to spam and other, things that, teams can think might be fun to do, but it's not really pertinent to what they're actually going to see, right? So making it relevant. And then with those 35 million reporters we have deployed across the globe, it really helps feed us that insight into curating those IOCs that are going to be of value to you if you have our intelligence feed. We also take that intelligence feed and push it into our Triage and Vision products, which I'll talk a little bit more on the next slide. And we see over 10 million messages a week just being able to be actioned on proactively and by what your users are submitting. And again, just with that footprint across the globe, it really helps organizations be able to benefit from the network effect that Cofense has. So our insights are being able to see what's making it past the SEG and being able to have an intelligence feed that is human vetted, right? We don't just take, we don't have any open source feeds in our feed. We have proprietary collections, some of those being some of our customers that we support in our Phishing Defense Center and through those reporters that are submitting with that reporter button. And then we're able to take that not only to provide an intelligence feed that you are able to subscribe to and curated, enriched reports that go along with that, kind of explaining, allowing you to dig into as your TCI teams might be doing their research and threat hunting, but then proactively, some of the products that we have are Protect and our Vision. So as we feed in those IOCs, as well as some of the feeds that you might have that you can feed into Vision to auto-quarantine those messages as they're coming in. So taking that out of the inbox before the user even has a moment to interact with it, which, moving that goalpost further along to prevent that phishing attack from actually taking. And then detecting, right, as I mentioned, training your users on how to identify what is a true phishing message and then reporting that. And then triage is how our SOC teams can process all of those reports that are now coming in, because once you enable the user with that button, they're going to keep reporting things. And part of our capabilities that we have within Triage is getting back to that user to let them know, hey, that was malicious or that's just spam. You can unsubscribe to that, or how you could handle that. But one of the things that, as I spent many years in the business as, and we see finance themed messages, which I'll get to in a moment. If you're in finance and you're expecting, you reported a message, it looks suspicious, I'm not sure if I should interact with it, you're on high alert, because you know that you have to make these payments, not to even talk about all of the banking thing that's happening right now, but you're expected to process those payments, right? And so if you're not getting back to that user to let them know, hey, we're taking a look at this, then they're going to interact with that, right? And then that becomes an incident all in itself. So curating those messages, clustering them together, making it efficient for your SOC, and to be able to have some automation capabilities with both Triage and Vision are beneficial in many ways to your organization. Okay, so now the meat of what I'm going to talk about today. I always love digging into the real threats that we see coming through from our customers. So there's 3 or 4 major categories that we really look at when it comes to our phishing, when malicious emails come into our phishing defense center or even to our Triage appliances, is business email compromise, credential, which thank goodness you got to hear about how to protect that on the last talk, so I can kind of re-emphasize why it's so critical. And then malware, what we see as far as malware being delivered. And, whether those are links or attachments, most of what we're seeing today is links, but I'll get into where attachments becomes a little bit more dangerous. So business email compromise, so there is, and also sometimes in some regions it's known as CEO fraud. We also are bucketing vendor email compromise in this category. These are emails that no link, no attachment, it's just a conversation. So they're trying to get the recipient to interact with them, right, to have a conversation. We did a study last year to see how many emails does it take before they get to that, right? Because we put AI and detection mechanisms in place to look for certain keywords, they've learned that too, like they have with all of our other phishing detection mechanisms we have in place. They're always looking to find ways to bypass those and to get around those, right? And so we see them using a multi-threaded conversation to be able to get past those, right? If they can, not ask for that wire or gift card until that second or third email, it's more likely to, get past and interact with that and have success of getting somebody to interact and engage with them, and then ultimately send off that money that they're looking for. So when I mentioned vendor email compromise, the email that you see right here is, asking for, hey, do you have your accounts receivable register? I need to look at, what's going on with our vendors, what's outstanding. And so what a threat actor can now do with that report is look to see, okay, who owes you money, contact names, how much money do they owe? Maybe your register even has some invoice numbers on there so they can make it legitimate. And so then they might create this campaign that is very legitimate looking, right, spoofing the name of the person that you may interact with. Maybe they're saying, hey, so-and-so isn't available anymore on the account, so send it to me. And by the way, we need to change our bank account to now use this, or, it's very urgent that you pay us so you don't lose services. And this is where we're really seeing significant losses to organizations. It's not uncommon as I go out and do speaking engagements or even just attend conferences and have conversations around this threat, that ultimately I hear a story about, oh yeah, I worked with an organization and they lost $1 million in one payment that they had mispaid to somebody. So again, this is becoming a very, very dangerous, expensive fraud threat to organizations as we try and defend against this. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how these are becoming more successful. So attachments, while we are seeing fewer attachments making it through, this is one of the top ones that we see making it through. HTML files. Why HTML files? Well, there are actually legitimate business applications that use these file attachments to send through. So it's hard to just flat out block them like we can with ISO files. For a little while they were using ISO, which is a software installation file that they were using to send their malware through. Well, guess what? We don't need to send those through email, so we can block those at the SEG. This one is not so easy to do so. So this is where it really becomes critical to train your users on what to look out for, what applications maybe you have in your organization that you should expect to see these types of files getting through. And of course, they're using common things that, the user would expect, an HTML file. Microsoft, 0365 has expired. You need to reset your password. Another example here is, it maybe we are able to add some of those AI ML detections for keywords like Microsoft. Did it come from Microsoft? If it says Microsoft, some other ways that we can block this. But what we see in this one is they actually use the right to left in here. It's not an MP3 file. It's actually an HTML file. So when the user opens it up, it's going to create that login page. But then when we look at the nuances of this page, we do see there's a little bit of spelling error in here, which is kind of interesting because, and then that I in voicemail is really a lowercase l, not an I. But we see fewer and fewer grammar as items to look for, clues to look for. Is this message legitimate? When it comes to credential phish, while you may have your user reset their password, if you aren't using MFA like we just heard about, then they are going to be able to log in quickly, set up some rules and now auto forwarding in your Outlook to look for keywords such as invoice, accounts receivable, purchase order, quotes, things of financial significance, right, that they can then leverage to use those messages to send on or to learn more about your organization, to be able to ask for payment and payment set up like the bank account information. So even though that, user may have their password reset, if you're not using MFA, they're going to be able to have, to be able to log in, set those rules, and still have access to that inbox and look for particular things while also setting up rules to then delete that message that's been forwarded out. So another important thing to enable once you've also enabled that MFA that we just heard about is to disable auto forwarding rules if you're able to. That was one of the first things I did when I took over the CISO role here is turn that, disable that, and that's where I found, we have a couple of systems that need to have auto forwarding, so we put some exceptions in for that, and then everyone else is blocked, because not only is it prevent you from this, but there's probably also maybe potential data leakage that might be happening with that. So another tactic that we see when it comes to credential phish is while this looks like it's a PDF document that's attached here, it's actually just an image that has an embedded link that opens up that credential page. So this is one of those reasons why we disable auto loading of images that come into our emails. And I know even when we have our simulations, customer operators will ask, how do I get rid of that, red X box that doesn't load the image? Well, this is exactly why we do that, right? And trying to get them to understand that there's a purpose why we, add these controls into our Exchange to be able to prevent some of these interactions from happening. So now that the threat actors have gotten really good and understand the value of that they are successful with sending HTML files, well, now they can send malware in them. And so this is the shift that we are starting to see now, is that they're adding in malware to these HTML files. So this one's just a couple weeks old, and this one was delivering Amade. So again, it just, another use case where it really is really important for us to start looking at how can we disable or block these types of files. And then, if you have business applications that are sending them, go back to your business application, your software vendors, and ask, is there another way that we can send notifications that doesn't require us to send in an HTML file? So this one was interesting. So we often talk about, it's not always, we can't just block on one element about a message, right? There's nuances about this. Our indicators of compromise, might include subject line, the links, maybe the sender. So this one caught my eye because I actually was thumbing through and I thought, okay, here's a relevant one. We see this quite often where they'll put a little preview image of the email in here, and then they have the link in there. This one has this RFQ number in here, and the sender is Kareem. And so then I found another one. Oh wait, all they did was change the RFQ number here, but everything else is the same, right? I still see it from Kareem. I still see the same link in there. So maybe two indicators are the same, but one is different, right? So we want to be able to block some of these things proactively. But then I saw this one that was written in a different language, and I scratched my head for a moment and went, okay, wait, the RFQ, that number's still the same. I still say the same link down there, but Sergio, okay, did that translate? So at first when I saw the message, I went, oh, okay, it's just in their local language. It just translated it. But no, we went from Kareem doesn't translate to Sergio. So just a really good example of how they can take that same email and then customize it to whoever their target audience is, or who they're, might be looking to target. So success, right? And so now we look to see what other types of Office files can we send to get delivery into the inbox, right? As Microsoft tries to add additional controls in place, how we can have configuration, reducing, we can't have macros anymore, right? Because bad guys use macros and they install software on our machines. So let's disable that. Okay, threat actor, what do we do now? Let's look for other file types that, are getting through. Okay, I don't know about you, but I use OneNote internally to just make some notes. I shared a link with my boss when I was sharing my status report with him weekly, but never would I email one outbound. So, so this is a good indicator to an end user, right, that why am I receiving a OneNote file from somebody externally? It's not something that you use to communicate with over email. It's more of a productivity tool. But threat actors, again, have learned to use these file types, and they are sending some pretty nasty malware in these. So this is one that you might want to consider, blocking externally, right? Let your users send it internally to each other, maybe share links with each other. But really, is it necessary to receive OneNotes from external email? There we go. So, Emotet return. So just in the last couple of weeks, we have a researcher who is big into following this. He's been following it since probably its inception many, many years ago. And so this is the bane of his day, is when he starts seeing chatter in Emotet retooling and tuning things up. So we saw them last summer. They went away. They popped up a little bit in November with some new tactics they were using, and then they went offline until just a couple weeks ago. And so now they are full charge, off and running. And this is where they are also leveraging those stolen emails that they've scraped from inboxes and using those in a way that we call reply chain. So if you scroll down in this message, there's actually another conversation happening, and then this message just pops up at the top. So kind of might give that user some indication that maybe this is legitimate. I need to interact with them. I worked in an organization that we flat out blocked zip files, whether they were encrypted or not. This one happens to be encrypted, and so they give them, or password protected, so they give them the password to open up this right in the email itself. So again, look for ways that we can block these, but Emotet tends to deliver some pretty nasty malware and do some pretty damage to organizations, as we have seen, and they continue to tool their tactics. But I didn't cover ransomware, and I often get asked, what phishing emails deliver ransomware? Well, phishing emails don't deliver the ransomware, but they deliver the steps prior to that ransom attack from executing. And so what we see in that initial one, right, we talked about malware delivery and credential delivery, right? So with those, then that can lead into their steps. So I like to just kind of show this slide a little bit to show the whole, the chain of attack that happens with it. So, between the time of that initial phishing attack happening, whether it's credential or malware, to the ransom attack actually happening can be days, weeks, and months. So there is time to proactively look for those emails. That's why it's so critical to train your users to identify those phishing messages that might seem suspicious. Something just seems off about this. Get those off to your teams to remediate and mitigate those phishing threats so that you can protect yourself from becoming a ransom attack victim. So that's what I have. I probably went faster than I anticipated, so I'll leave it here at the poll.
It's always, it's so funny. You get the, when we're prepping to do these presentations, right? Sometimes you run it and you're 5 minutes over, and sometimes you're 5 minutes under, and you never know. Well, thank you for that wonderful presentation. Honestly, that was, it's so interesting to see all of those examples back to back and really understand the why and the what, because I think so often, even if we're doing training, we're just taking it kind of one at a time, or we're expecting it in training and we're not actually digging into it. And something you said right at the end there, the exploring that point about the delivery of ransomware versus the steps prior. And I think that is a really commonly misunderstood. We think that the ransomware is just dovetailed right into that email instead of being a part of that whole attack chain. So I really appreciate you taking the time to clarify that for us, Tanya.
Yeah, and it's really critical then, taking those IOCs and then pushing them down to your endpoints and into your network, right? Because then you can start to see, okay, did somebody else get this message, right? How can you mitigate that potential attack from furthering?
Absolutely. Yeah, if we don't understand the attacks, then it makes it hard to understand how to protect, and meaning that in a very full sense, not just, you need to know that phishing is coming, but you also need to know how it's working through the system.
Right.
So I think that's important to dig into. And I do want to just mention, as you said, we've got that poll up on the screen here. So if you would like any additional information, and I'm sure I see a lot of questions coming in, so I'm sure there are a lot of information seekers out there. So there's a lot of great options on their data sheet, white papers, case studies, and so on. So please do take a minute now and click on that poll and let Cofense know how they can follow up with you after we wrap up today. While folks are clicking on that poll, should we dig into a few of these questions here?
Sure, let's go.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to actually combine two questions here. Both are a little bit on the forward-thinking side, and if you can break out your crystal ball. We had some questions about what the evolution and what you think the biggest threats in phishing will continue to be. And I'm going to dovetail another question on there. Do you think that credential phishing will actually start to trail off a little bit?
It's funny you asked that, because we are about to launch our annual report in 2 weeks, and so that's one of the things that I get to dig into each year. And I was surprised that it was holding steady. It didn't decline.
Wow.
It didn't have a significant jump, but we do still see that as the highest threat. When it comes to kind of trends that we're seeing, we are seeing them start to explore other file types. This morning, I saw one of our analysts post up another file type that we hadn't expected, a .pub publish file, right? Like, why would a threat actor use this, right? We also see them using legitimate cloud services like DocuSign and Dropbox, right? Like, those are ways, while they are still, those entities are still trying to, ward off how their platforms are being used, but sometimes they're a stage one, right? That document might have a link in it that leads to, another one. They don't want to, they've invested in a lot in their infrastructure, so they'll have multiple stages in the delivery of that email and that phish, right? So that first one is just the link taking you to another page, because they can pop that up and take that down really quickly and go undetected, right? Because they don't want to burn all of their back end, stage 2 and stage 3 of their infrastructure. So that's what makes it really hard to kind of chase these threat actor groups, right? Because they'll stand up that first stage and take it down very quickly. They might put it up for an hour, blast out some emails, get some credentials, take that back down, right? Or get a delivery or interaction with, maybe a malware delivery.
Yeah, and that's so, Alan is the one who sort of posed that question, and he was wondering how he can leverage this information of what's coming into training, which segues nicely into the next question I was going to ask you, which is, so somebody out there is thinking, well, we're already using phishing simulation training, and is that enough? Are we set? Have we ticked that box?
Well, phishing simulation really is how you get your users prepared, but that it's really giving them that ability to be able to send it off to your security teams, right? And then making sure that your teams, right? It's probably one of the highest volume ticket items that any SOC sees today. That's why we've kind of set up our phishing defense center, right, to offload some of that. But it really does become critical to be able to really pay attention to what your users are reporting, because they're usually have a little bit more context to that message that you might not have, right? If Joe in finance says, I don't know who this person is, this just seems funny, but and you get it and you're like, well, I don't see anything weird about it. We also see them using geofencing, right? So, maybe they're sending an email to somebody, but they want to make sure that they really are only targeting somebody that's in a certain region, especially when we see the whole, what we're seeing with the Russian and Ukraine things, right? Or going after certain, especially with nation states, right? They don't want sandboxing technologies to open it up, right? So if it opens up in a sandbox, it's not going to execute, right? But if you change your location to maybe a geolocation that they might be targeting, or that your keyboard language is set to a certain way, then it will execute, right? So it becomes a little bit more sophisticated. They've really kind of ramped up these tactics as well to be able to detect, is this really good or bad?
So the key thing I'm taking away, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so the key thing is, Joe in finance, pick up the phone at this point. If you're really not sure and your SOC really isn't sure if it's good or bad, right, do that human verification just to validate. Because we have seen when it comes to the vendor email compromise that I talked about, where the threat actor will go to extreme lengths to set up a spoofed web page so that link in there, like everything that you're doing to vet that, looks legitimate. And so I had talked to one CISO who implemented a whole new process within their receivables team, which, he's not a finance guy, but he saw the value because of the loss that they suffered, that any new bank changes, you're not paying that person until I'm putting a 3-day hold on that, because the bank needs to actually verify that is a legitimate bank change, right? So there's other process change that we should start thinking about too that are outside of cybersecurity, right? Those are, having been a finance person, I totally get why you would, want to make sure you true up your processes to make sure you have that verification in place to hopefully mitigate some of those losses.
That's so important that making those processes sort of reflect and really encouraging that constant communication and checking in, and that iterative learning process and adjustment process. Never a set it and forget it with this stuff. And Tanya, I really appreciate you being here to walk us through this, and I think it was really interesting to kind of get into some of those specific examples. Before you leave us today, if somebody out there is ready to jump in, wants to get started, what do you recommend is their first step for getting started with Cofense?
Check out our website. We have lots of content in there that can really help you understand where it is you need to start with email security, right? It's not just one element. It's kind of an end-to-end solution, because there's like we just talked about, right? There's many facets about how you need to protect yourself.
Love it. Okay. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us, for answering some questions. I know we didn't get to all the questions, so we will make sure that those go to the team. And thank you again. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
All right, and thanks to all of you who took some time to fill out the poll. I'm also going to remind you to head on over to the Handouts tab and click on that Cofense handout, which both asks and answers the question, why Cofense? So this is a great follow-up to what we just heard from Tanya about identifying those threats and leveraging the insights from other reporters, as well as digging into protection, detection, and response capabilities. So we're spending some time with that handout. Download that now and save that for later. And I'm seeing some good high fives coming in. I love that. I love when you guys let us know that something resonated. That's great to see. I thought it was very interesting as well. Speaking of interesting, I think it's about time we did another prize giveaway. Let's do a $300 Amazon gift card. A reminder that you do need to be here present with us at the webinar today. Our second 2 of 3 lucky winner here with us today is Roberto Reyes of Maryland. Roberto Reyes of Maryland. Congratulations, Roberto. As always, we will get in touch about claiming your prize after we wrap. Now, don't forget there is still one more chance to win a prize today. Plus, we have that best question gift card from each session, so keep those questions coming in. I can tell you the competition is fierce. We've got some great questions out there today. All right, well, get those question fingers ready. Get your keyboards out because I know you're going to have a lot to say to these next 2 presenters. Up next, I am so excited to introduce you all to not 1, but 2 awesome humans who are here to tell us more about Palo Alto Networks. We're going to be chatting with Tomer Heimoff, Principal Security Architect, and Ido Van Dyke, Principal Security Architect at Palo Alto Networks. Tomer and Ido, thank you so much for being here with us today. I know you have a lot to cover, and I know we want to leave some time for questions at the end, so I'm going to hand things right on over to you. Take it away.
Thank you, Jess. Very happy to be here. So today we're going to show you how we are going to automate phishing response with Cortex XOR. So a little about ourselves. Ido, can you present yourself?
Okay, my name is Ido. I work in the Tel Aviv site in Cortex XOR in the security research and architecture team. I started my career in the Israeli Defense Force, actually, as a developer, and continued from there as a researcher and developer and a malware analyst. I've done some reverse engineering as well for malware. And today I'm building playbooks and use cases in XOR.
Thanks, Ido. So I'll present myself. My name is Tomer Haimov. I have about 12 years of experience in both IT and cybersecurity domains. In my current role as a security architect in Palo Alto Networks, I'm part of the Cortex XOR R&D team. I'm focused on developing automation packs for SOC use cases, and I'm a subject matter expert in automating phishing response. Okay, so we'll start with the agenda. The first thing would be what is XOR? Then we go to why automate phishing. We'll talk about the reasons of automating phishing. Phishing and XOR, we'll discuss about the content provided in the phishing pack and how we can use it to respond and investigate phishing attacks. We'll continue then to predicting phishing URLs. We're going to show you how we can use XOR to predict phishing URLs, and eventually we'll show an incident demo, just a quick overview of a phishing incident inside Cortex XOR. So what is XOR? In this image, you can see that Cortex XOR provides all the necessary tools to automate incident response. We ingest alerts from SIEM, EDR, email security, and much more products. We also have the TEAM platform, which stands for Threat Intel Management Platform. We also ingest IOCs from threat intelligence feeds. And we automate the response process using playbooks. Our extensive product integrations drive a lot of out-of-the-box automation content packs that we provide via our marketplace and also serve as building blocks for thousands of automation scripts that can be used by the analysts to build their own custom playbooks or workflows. So we have probably integration for the tools you're currently using in your SOC. If you have legacy apps you want to integrate, our Bring Your Own Integration wizard makes it simple. So here's just a few examples of the integrations that we're currently using in the phishing pack. There are probably more, but this is just a few examples. So each incident comes with a war room, which is a shared workspace where analysts can chat during active integrations or tag someone. You can do ad hoc actions via CLI. And also, all of the actions by the playbook or human are auto-documented, making it nice repository for auditing or training other analysts. This means your analysts have a single place to manage their incident end-to-end. Cortex XOR also have a flexible dashboard and reporting suite that's powered by a widget library. You can create dashboards and reports according to incident types, personnel, indicator data, or any other cross-section you desire. You also get a lot of out-of-the-box dashboards. We integrate with all the main CSM tools so analysts can open, update, or close incident tickets without pivoting into multiple screens. Our Threat Intel platform, TIP, streamlines the investigation process for SOC analysts so they have Threat Intel at their fingertips and can see how it mapped to their incidents. Not only that, it also enables threat analysts to manage and curate threat feeds and build their own reports on the same platform. A unique feature is our Unit 42 threat repository that comes packaged with TEAM. Unique visibility into attacks crowdsourced from the industry's largest footprint of network, endpoint, and cloud intel sources. All of our out-of-the-box content, playbooks, scripts, incident layouts, and more is divided into packs, and these packs are featured on our marketplace. The marketplace features pack created by us, by partners, and by general community. Okay, so let's continue. Why automate phishing? Phishing alerts are as much of a problem today as they were decades ago. This is because, well, first of all, attackers can leverage automation to launch high-quantity phishing attacks with just a click of a button. Also, security teams aren't able to follow set processes while responding to phishing alerts. They must coordinate across email inboxes, threat intel, next-gen firewall ticketing, and also a lot of other tools. Lastly, phishing is still an ever-present and growing threat. Spear phishing attacks are sophisticated and sometimes indistinguishable from real emails. Security orchestration platforms can use phishing playbooks that execute repeatable tasks at machine speed, identify false positives, and prime the SOC for standardized phishing response at scale. More importantly, the quick identification and resolution of false positives gives analysts more time to deal with genuine phishing attacks and prevent them from slipping through the cracks. Phishing emails can be ingested from a variety of detection sources, such as SIEMs, email quarantine inboxes, or a suspicious email reported by employees. Once the email is ingested, a playbook is triggered and goes through steps to automate enrichments and response. Let's look at XOR's out-of-the-box phishing playbook in action. Ido, you can take it from here.
Thank you very much, Tomer. So let's talk about phishing in XOR, now that we understand XOR. But before we dive into phishing in XOR, we have to explain what playbooks are, because playbooks stand at the heart of XOR's automation. Every integration is actually Python, JavaScript, or PowerShell wrapper for a product's API. Each integration has its own command, and users can also create their own integrations. In this screenshot, you can see some of the commands supported by the Gmail integration. Playbooks are a workflow presented by blocks, which actually automatically execute integration commands in the order they are placed. And like in code, the user can define the inputs that the integration command will receive inside of a playbook. And each command has its own outputs. And the beauty is that the user doesn't even need to know how to code at all. If the user wants to run something more complex than an integration command, our hundreds of out-of-the-box scripts can also be used inside playbooks. And of course, the user can add their own scripts if they want to and if they know how to code. So now that we understand what XOR is and also what playbooks in XOR are, let's take a look at what our phishing playbook does. So we have 5 main sections in the playbook. Let's take a look at each one of the sections, what it does. Our first section is the triage. The triage section of our playbooks consists of collecting and parsing our data that came with the incident. So if our incident came from a user report who forgot to attach the email file, we use our email gateway integrations to go and fetch that file from the user's inbox automatically. We have an automation that parses the email file and extracts important information from it, like the email subject, email body, the headers, and any file attachments. We integrate with sandboxes to detonate file attachments and URLs and collect even more information for processing. We also have automations that extract indicators from various file types. So for example, we can extract images from PDF files, and then we can also extract text and indicators from the images themselves using our OCR integration. And then we also have the ability to extract macros from Office documents and more. On the right side of this image, you can see that the extracted headers are later presented to the user in the incident layout, which is completely customizable by the user. The user can choose what to display and where. On all of the data that we collect, we have a feature called auto-extract, which automatically runs regex expressions to find and extract IOCs. The next stage in our playbook is the enrichment. Our enrichment process incorporates different integration, scripts, and also machine learning. We, for example, classify IPs and email addresses as internal or external. We create screenshots of URLs by using an integration called rasterize. We enrich file hashes, domains, and any other supported indicators using threat intelligence integrations like VirusTotal or Recorded Future. We use a pre-trained model, or the user can use their own trained model to predict the type of phishing email, if it's spam, malicious, or it's just a benign email. And we also use machine learning to predict whether a URL is phishing or not, using various factors like search engine optimization, existing logos on the website, and more. The next stage is the investigation. So the investigation stage is where we conduct deeper analysis and other custom checks related to phishing. For example, we analyze the email's SPF, DKIM, and DMARC headers, as well as proprietary Microsoft headers, and then we display the results in the layout for the analyst to investigate. We also have an automation that checks for domain squatting. If the attacker is trying to impersonate a legitimate domain, the analyst will be able to see that in the layout. As you can see in this screenshot, the domain is highlighted. This is because we automatically created an indicator for that domain on our system. Remember, we are also a threat intel management platform. So the domain received a medium score by our domain squatting script, and it will stay as evidence on that indicator's page. Inside of our phishing playbook, there is another sub-playbook. Yes, you can actually create nested playbooks. The sub-playbook uses a script that automatically looks back at previous phishing incidents ingested into XOR and checks for textual similarities between them and the current incident. If similar incidents are found, we link them together and create a phishing campaign incident where they can be managed centrally in one place. Phishing campaign incidents are automatically created by our playbook, and they feature their own unique incident layout. The layout features dynamic sections. These are sections that are they automatically run scripts behind the scenes. This is valuable because we can dynamically aggregate the important information from the phishing incidents and present that in the phishing campaign layout, as well as reflect any changes that happen over time. Additionally, we allow the user to take actions on the campaign right from within the layout, like assigning the related incidents to them, or close the incidents, link them together, unlink them, or even send an email to the recipients of the campaign. Again, the user can completely customize everything here, including the dynamic section scripts and the information displayed, if they want to. We then have the hunting stage. So inside of our phishing playbook, we have another sub-playbook which automatically hunts for malicious indicators. So if, for example, we found a malicious URL within a PDF file which was attached to the email file, we are able to look for that URL in other emails using Office 365 Defender. As part of the hunting process, we also get information about user clicks. So if a user clicks on a URL, it will be displayed in the layout along with the user email, the chain of URL redirects, whether the click was allowed or blocked, and whether the user proceeded to the website despite it being blocked. After that, after we collected our data, enriched our data, investigated, hunted, and so on, we have the verdict stage, and this is where all of the information we processed goes through the auto-extract feature, which automatically extracts and enriches indicators. All indicators get a score from multiple sources with various reliabilities. And eventually, we take into account all of the indicator scores, the email authenticity verdict, the current incident severity, and whether any critical users were targeted in this phishing attack. And we create a final severity verdict for the incident. The last part we have is the remediation stage. So based on the verdict that we just calculated previously, we decide whether we should search and delete the email from user inboxes, automatically of course, and whether to block any malicious indicators. Because of our vast number of integrations, we can block any kind of indicator automatically. We can block files using EDRs, we can block IPs using firewalls, we can block the sender using email gateway, and disable compromised accounts using Active Directory. And despite our powerful automation, we know that users want to give the final OK. So we also have a manual task in our playbook, which lets the user take any additional remediation actions and go over all the findings in the incident layout. And then finally, we close the investigation.
Okay, thanks, Edo. I'll take it from here. Let's talk about predicting phishing attacks. So as mentioned earlier, the phishing playbook uses some machine learning capabilities. One of the automations can predict whether URLs extracted from the reported email represent phishing sites or not. This automation can actually predict phishing URLs using a pre-trained model. This model will use several integrations or automations. The first thing would be whois. It will check the domain age. Second thing, it will check whether there are any usage of IP or special ports in the URL. It will check for logos of well-known companies in the website. It will also check whether there is a sign-in page. What is the search engine optimization results? It will wait until all of the redirections are done. So if I get a phishing URL and I click on it, and there are several redirections in it, it will check the last one, and even if it is a JavaScript-based redirection. This is also configurable. Last thing, it will use internal scoring for the results. Okay, so now I'm going to show you an incident demo. So basically, this is a playbook. This is our phishing playbook, which was triggered when one of the phishing incidents was ingested. You can see all of the related sections here, as Ido mentioned earlier. All of the green tasks are tasks that ran successfully. Okay, we have a mini map here, so I can browse through the playbook. Let's take a look at the other tabs in the layout. So if we'll click on the case info tab, we can see some basic information here, like whether the reported email was originally attached. It can be also retrieved or nothing. What is the attacker email address? What is the victim email address? How many attachments, etc. We can see an image of the email HTML, so we can click on it and see the image of the mail itself. We can see URL screenshots, URL extracted from the email itself. So, for example, this email contained a LinkedIn sign-in page, which was obviously phishing. We can see that we have the EML attachment here. We can just download it if we want in order to investigate it by ourselves. There is a campaign related to this incident. We can see all of the indicators extracted from the email here. We can see the verdict for each one of them concluded by all of our other integrations. Another important section would be response action. So in case the analyst decides this email should be deleted from the user inbox, you can just click on the delete email and the email should be deleted from the user inbox. The investigation tabs show us just more data. So for example, we have the email headers, which were extracted from the email. Okay, and we can browse through the headers. We have the headers analysis here. We can see the email authenticity check results. So this email was passed. And other scores for the Microsoft headers. And another interesting part would be the clicks. So we can see there were 2 clicks of the user. We can see who clicked, what was the URL, what is the timestamp. This is obviously an incident that came like a few days ago. So don't take this time like it was now. It was a few days ago. And we can see also whether there was a URL chain. So if there was any redirection along the way, we would see all of the URL chain here. We can see the action. We can see that it was blocked and that the user was clicked through one of the URLs. And we can see that the machine learning automation recognized that there is a LinkedIn logo here. So it also raised the severity of this specific URL. You can see also that it was checking all of these things. Is there a logging form, search engine optimization, it was bad, etc. So next thing would be, why use the phishing pack? So there are a few reasons. The first thing would be, we have 2 ways to ingest incidents. The first would be reports coming from users to a listener mailbox. We can use Gmail, AWS, O365, and MS Graph. We have alerts, incident being created based on security events from email gateways like Proofpoint, FireEye, or Mimecast. The second thing would be campaigns, detecting using machine learning aggregated indicators, insights like who is investigating the incidents and how severe they are. Also, everything is configurable. Manually decide potential harmful actions, whether to delete malicious emails, block indicators, etc. And the last thing would be that this is constantly updated. The content of the phishing is being constantly updated. Phishing is our most adopted use case, and we're actively engaged with customers and research teams in Palo Alto Networks.
Another thing here is that all of our content is open to the public. It's on GitHub. You can feel free to browse it or even contribute to it. Tomer, can you just share the slide again?
Yeah.
So in a bit, you will be able to see some resources to help you get started with QR codes that you can scan to get the links.
Yeah, I'm sharing it.
It's actually not sharing.
Oops,
Oh yeah,
sorry.
now I see it. Okay, great. So I think we have some time for questions. Are there any questions?
Yes, there are. Thank you guys so much for that awesome presentation, especially getting to kind of see things in action and see that use case. That's really exciting. We have a ton of great questions coming in, and we're a little short on time, so we will not get to all of them, but I'm going to try to sneak in a few. You guys ready to dive in?
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Let's start with this one here. So you guys were mentioning the sort of options with the playbook and setting automation to manual, but we have someone here wondering, is it possible to add or remove things from the phishing playbook?
So yeah, I'll take this question. Definitely yes. First of all, the phishing playbook has inputs. Every playbook has inputs, which the user can change. The inputs determine which part of the playbooks run and how. And in addition, users can also create copies of playbooks, and then they can add or remove tasks as they will, and they can just create their playbooks from scratch if they want to.
Oh, that's very cool. And I assume you can set that so that only specific identities can make changes.
Yeah, we have role-based. Our system takes into consideration roles. You can, take some permissions from users and give others more permissions to do things. Definitely.
Perfect. Okay, this next question here. What if I want to integrate a product that doesn't exist in the XSOAR's marketplace?
I think I'll take that. I think it's a great question. Well, we have more than 900 integrations. So it will most likely that you will find the integration you're looking for. But if you don't, for that, I think that I have our marketplace. Yeah. So this is our marketplace. You can browse through the marketplace. You can see there are a lot of integrations here, and you'll probably find what you're looking for. However, if you don't find it, then you have two options. One of the options would be we have a portal for feature requests. It calls I think I have it here as well. Yeah. You see there is a Cortex XOR customer feature request. So you can ask for the specific integration or upvote someone else's requests for an integration. So for example, if I'll just filter based on shipped, then you can see that we shipped 560 requests already. The last one was like a month ago. So we try to do it as fast as we can based on popularity, etc. The other thing you can do is create your own integration in XOR. So we have an SDK that will make it very easy to develop to XOR and create integrations. And for example, you can just go to the integrations page and click on bring your own integration and upload your integration. And also, if you want to contribute your integration to their marketplace, we have a team dedicated to review it and help with the process.
That's awesome. And that's, you were just kind of talking about that as well. And we actually had gotten a question, and I'm going to find it from Rob here, that I think you answered, right at the end there, but I'm going to ask this question to clarify. So he's wondering, is the content featured on the marketplace free?
Yeah, okay. Even though it's called the marketplace, almost everything is free. I think we have around 900 free packs and maybe 30 premium packs that some customers created. And remember that you can go, of course, on GitHub and see because it's all open source. So yeah, feel free.
Feel free. I like it. Dun-dun-dun. Okay, well, that's awesome and such great content available to everyone out there. We're going to have to wrap it there, even though we do still have some questions coming in. And we will make sure that all gets sent to your team so that you guys can follow up. Before you leave us, though, if somebody out there is really excited, wants to jump in, start learning more about Palo Alto Networks, what do they do? What's their first step?
Okay, Jeff.
So I think that the first step they should do is, first of all, go to our website. They can check in Here, they can check why Cortex XOR, how to become a partner. They have all of the resources they need over here in the marketplace Pandeb. This would be a great place to start with.
I like that. Start by educating and learning and researching. That's a great place to get started.
Yeah, and also we have our hands-on workshop. You can just scan this QR code, start with there.
Perfect. Okay, well, I wish we could keep going. We are going to have to wrap it there. Tomer, Ido, thank you so much again for such a wonderful presentation, for sticking around to answer some audience questions. I don't even want to know what time it is in Israel right now, so we're going to let you go. But it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you both today.
Thank you very much, Jess. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, well, we've got that poll up for you all so you can let Palo Alto Networks know what additional information you would like to get. I want to say I love, and we're getting a lot of this today. You guys are just in a fun and positive mood, and I'm digging it. I'm seeing a lot of high fives coming in for Palo Alto for the presentation and for the product. That's amazing. Love to see those shout outs from current customers. Thank you for that, Saeed. All right, well, while you guys are clicking on that poll, I'm going to remind you all to head on over to the Handouts tab. Make sure that you get the slide deck that we just saw from Ido and Tomer's presentation. And that's a great way to make sure that the information that we got, kind of sticks in your brain, right? There's only so much we can retain. But also to potentially share that with other folks on your team. So make sure you grab that slide deck and save that for later. Also be sure to be clicking on the poll. I'm giving you another second or two while you get that locked and loaded. Run on back over to your computer screen if you stood up to stretch it out, which is a great idea, by the way. But first click on the poll, then stretch it out. All right, well, I'm going to move things along here because we have another exciting presentation to get to, and I know that you guys are all loving this. Like I said, the questions and engagement are really exciting today, and this is exciting stuff. They were a little scary and a little exciting. Speaking of maybe a little scary and a little exciting, we'll see. I'm going to introduce you to our next wonderful presenter here at the EcoCast, and that's Jared Brodsky, Principal Sales Engineer at CyberArk. Jared, thank you so much for being here with us today. We've had a great, awesome, and info-packed day. As I said, maybe a little intimidating, but hopefully mostly inspiring for the folks out there in the audience today. I'm excited to hear what you've got in store for us. Jared, take it away.
Great, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Welcome everybody to my part of the webcast. Jared Brodsky here, like I said, Principal Solutions Engineer with CyberArk. And we're going to go through an agenda here, right? Recent trends, 8 ways that we're going to fight phishing, what to do if you get breached, and those next steps, right? So, I get these phishing campaigns all the time, right? We send them out to our users. I receive them as an end user, and sometimes they're good. Those guys are getting pretty good at sending out emails that look really legit, and they're getting harder and harder to to combat, especially when we have those things like ChatGPT out there in the wild. So we all know the mantra: not if, but when, right? Everyone hears that. But, where does that come from? So, psychological studies on everything from brain chemistry to infant behavior to Ponzi schemes suggest that we can't really help ourselves, right? People, we inherently like to trust people. We're hardwired to trust, right? Even in that, zero trust environment that we're all trying to build out. Since the beginning of time, though, criminals have studied this human behavior, trying to exploit that trust that we offer. You guys remember that the Trojan horse from back in history class when all the soldiers are hiding inside. So they've taken all that research and they're continuously changing their methods, and they keep leveraging all the new technology that's out there to really try and get the better of us when we're least expecting it. So today as users, we are in this work from anywhere environment. We toggle frequently between our corporate device, our personal devices, and this type of device switching really works in the attacker's favor. What happens is we find that you become easier, more susceptible to social engineering attacks. Employees are conducting most of their personal lives online, making it much easier for attackers to conduct reconnaissance and connect with them on social networks. Think of the last time maybe you responded to a LinkedIn or a Facebook poll. Right? Where is that data going? That data is, my favorite is, hey, what's your favorite color and the street name that you left on to find out your your secret name, right? All those kind of weird polls that are out there. So, when a person has access to some, valuable corporate asset, be it a desktop or a mobile device or a laptop, attackers may spend months and months building a relationship actually before sending, that phishing email containing any malicious code or to a newly created website that can steal your login credentials. And here at CyberArk, we are we're the identity security company, and because of that, right, attackers are going after all of those identities and trying to exploit those. So expanded use of SaaS tools, generating new identities that end up in inadequately secured environments and not properly monitored. Think about AWS with the amount of resources that now need to be protected with all those identities. It becomes a bit much to try and control. So with some of the tools, every time a new team is set up, email accounts are created for the team to use. Attackers can really compromise this account or generate a fake account to send messages to the team. And lastly, new ways to deceive, right? With so many new digital tools in the mix, workers may be less likely to question the out-of-the-ordinary requests or changes in workflow. So it is really important to be able to, trust but verify when emails are coming in or you get an email that you think looks a little bit strange. Stop and think. What are we actually doing here? So how do we fight phishing, right? It's always that cat and mouse kind of game. We're getting all of our protections in place, and then a new sort of method comes in, be it a phishing message with some MFA bombing trying to get you through, like we saw in certain public breaches in recent times. But one of the big ones is ensuring that we have phishing-resistant MFA mechanisms, things that are typically FIDO2 compliant, really focusing and implementing those core zero trust policies, right? I just said it, but I'll say it again because it is important, that whole trust but verify. Another piece here, which is kind of interesting, is network segmentation, right? We don't typically think of network segmentation from a phishing perspective so much, but one knows, should someone get phished and some credentials potentially leak and, then an attacker has access, they can start moving laterally through your organization, your network. So, thinking about segmentation and micro-segmentation there is also an important way to fight, those phishing mechanisms. Securing devices, right? How do we make sure that devices are compliant, right? Fully up to date, running the latest software, so we're not, potentially getting exploited from, a known exploit out there. This one is a real one that's kind of blown up in the past 2-3 years, is those BYOD policies, right? We all of a sudden everyone, is in this new hybrid workforce, and people are bringing their own mobile phones, maybe even their own laptops into the organization, right? And this kind of ties in, what are we doing to ensure that those devices are fully secure and compliant to for your corporate identities to access corporate resources? Phishing exercises, I just got one the other day. I hope I passed, but it's great. It's really the training that goes along with this, especially unannounced training, to even your IT and security teams, right? Nobody should really know, except for a very, very limited few people, when those are taking place. So, because even the most technical resources that are out there in an organization, who think they won't fall for phishing, are equally susceptible as, somebody in marketing or in finance type of thing. Collaborating, right, on identity governance. This one, it was really also important. It will help us to understand who is supposed to have what permissions and where, right? Being able to ensure that people aren't overprivileged as they potentially move through an organization, change positions, change roles, because an attacker finds out someone has a little bit extra position that little bit extra permissions than they should have with that privilege creep, it is another way that you can be exploited from a phishing email. And lastly, right, lean on people, process, and technology guidance, right? Make sure that your security teams and your service teams are making sure that everyone is educated, that you're providing the right resources for anyone within the organization to reach out and talk to around, just email hygiene in your organization. So phishing resisting factors, right? At CyberArk, we provide a super wide number of factors, some of which can be configured to be fully phishing resistant. These are either our patented QR code, keyboardless and passwordless mechanism to log in with just your mobile phone and leveraging a trusted device. This is great. We find users love this, especially in certain organizations where you have to access different tiered resources where you may need to MFA multiple times throughout the day, enter a password. We make this super easy and extremely strong, right through your mobile device. Alternatively, we are fully FIDO2 compliant, which means your on-device authenticators, your FIDO2 keys, anything that is a AAL3 type of MFA token can fully be integrated within the CyberArk identity solution to really enhance your phishing protection within CyberArk identity. Now, one of the other things that we actually do besides just providing those factors for MFA is we actually have a calculator built into our MFA profile configurator on the back end that will tell you how strong your MFA profiles are according to NIST standards. So any combination will tell you, is it AAL1, AAL2, AAL3 compliant? And for anyone out there that may not be familiar with those terms, AAL, it is a NIST framework around authenticator assurance level, right? So how strong is that MFA that you're leveraging for your identity login, for your step-up authentications throughout your organization? So we talked a little bit about what we can do with phishing within your environment. And like I said, phishing resistant things such as FIDO, QR codes, physical tokens, number matching, right? This is a great tool that will require proof of presence that can make the bad guy's life a lot harder when it comes to trying to steal your identity. If you haven't seen it deployed, it shows you several numbers on the login screen, one number at the app. You must click on the number that matches the app to gain access. If you're under an MFA bombing attack, this would really reduce the risk of someone getting tired of receiving notifications and just blindly approving those MFA access requests. Again, foundational zero trust policies, requiring users to register phishing resistant authenticators as part of their account creation flow. Step up authentication prompts when accessing sensitive apps within your organization. So if somebody does get access, they won't be able to get into that higher tiered or tier 0 type of application without an additional level of MFA. Mandating MFA for personal profile modifications and setting up automatic alerts that flag risky user behavior. Segmenting your network, right? When phishing is successful, attackers' movement is limited within inside the network and be restricted to access sensitive resources will be blocked. Securing your devices, endpoint security hygiene is imperative as devices are more exposed to phishing and malware in a perimeterless environment. One major operational change to overcome will be maintaining a full, up-to-date inventory of users and devices. And to further expand upon the revisiting your BYOD policies, difficulties of verifying those devices can be compounded by unmanaged devices. Shipping hardened corporate laptops to remote workers is not always feasible, and workers may still want to connect to internet-facing corporate applications from a personal device. Consider implementing minimum standards for strengthening hybrid workers' home networks, such as changing default router credentials and using strong Wi-Fi passwords. And lastly, right, again, I said it before, I'll say it again because it is important, returning to that whole notion of psychology and the well-known cognitive bias known as the Dunning-Kruger effect. highlights people's tendency to overestimate their own capabilities. Live test scenarios and red team exercise can help with challenge thinking and uncover blind spots and strengthen security defenses. So what else can we do? What other recommendations can we put out there, right? We all think we're doing a good job, but there's always room for improvement. And that's really leaning on expert guidance, right? We want to leverage process and technology where the domain knowledge and the experience of your cybersecurity provider matters. With access to educational resources and an expert team that understands your business goals, your security organization can help improve outcomes in areas such as access reviews and collections, monitoring, virus scanning, performance testing, pen testing, resolving stalled workflows and processes, and delivering the right reports for the right stakeholders. Fostering greater collaboration, right? Work within your business functions to improve those identity governance processes. Enhance your lifecycle management. Take out all those manual steps that you might have in place for onboarding or offboarding accounts, right? Make sure that all of that and as much of that is fully automated throughout your identity lifecycle management. Finding your employees' assessments, assessing how well they're performing in a security perspective. And this even goes out to your third-party users, right? Maybe you're working with vendors or other contractors, ensuring that their security practices are also up to par with your own organization's security program. And lastly, right, monitor that access. Monitor your internal users' access. Monitor your vendor access. Make sure there's nothing going on that could potentially be linked back to a phishing campaign that may have taken place earlier in time. So you got phished. It happens. What do we do? What's the first things we should do? Check for anomalies, right? Talk to your SOC, see if there's any kind of weird alerts going on that are being fed into your SIM. For any accounts, follow NIST best practices and guidelines. If somebody thinks there's a security incident that may have taken place on their account, immediately have them reset their passwords, right? And that's not just your IAM passwords that are federated with SSO, but any other accounts that they may have that are not federated, that maybe cannot be tied in. For that, CyberArk offers our workforce password management solution that can help automate, storing and encrypting and resetting the passwords for those accounts. Updating your authentication policies, right? Just review your policies, make sure there's nothing there that would prevent anyone from being able to, find or exploit a weakness in the policies around anything that might be MFA related or over any services that may carry a little bit more privilege. So what's next, right? What do we got? We got a couple of resources available that we can provide to you, anywhere from evaluating your readiness. We have additional resources, and you can even request a demo to see how the CyberArk identity tool can help further protect you from phishing attacks, leveraging our zero trust methodology. So with that, I do want to say thank you for your time. I really do appreciate you taking the time out of your day to listen to what CyberArk can bring to the table to help you with your phishing attack prevention.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that presentation and for digging into that information with us. That has been such an interesting conversation. And as I said, I think it is really nice to actually switch gears a little bit from the fear side of things to the, okay, so what do we do side of things, which I think you hit really well for us today. So thank you very much for that, Jared. I appreciate it. I'm going to throw up a quick poll here that we've got for you. And this first one is a little bit different. Do you want to explain this at all, Jared?
Oops, sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, so so MFA factors, right? They're all out there. Some of them we like better than others. Oops. So basically, which is the most convenient MFA mechanism that you find out there? I'm always curious to see what you typically use day to day, right? We all know that in terms of convenience, we're all kind of used to that SMS, right? Because it's pretty much ubiquitous and everyone supports it. But from a security perspective, we all know that SMS is one of those more faulty, better than nothing, but it's still not the strongest method of MFA. So push notifications are great. QR codes, they're you know, we're doing a lot with QR codes. We're really liking it. But yeah, so we see what looks like push notifications seems to be the winner out there. We love push notifications, especially when you combine it with the on-device biometrics that we now have access to, and you know, everyone's mobile device, to kind of give you that double proof of presence of something you have and something you are. So they're really interesting responses. Thank you, everybody.
Well, and I'm going to move on to the next poll here, checking to see what additional information the folks would like to get about CyberArk. But I'm wondering if you could expand on that previous poll there. So of the MFA methods, and you know, you said you like the push notifications, but which one is the most phishing proof?
So the most phishing proof, I don't even think we had it up there, so it may have been a little bit of a trick question.
I like it.
Right, typically things that are rated as AAL3 devices, and the one that comes to mind are FIDO2 compliant devices, right? Things like a YubiKey or similar token-based devices, right? Those are inherently phishing-resistant devices. So those are the strongest method of preventing phishing in your organization. FIDO2, WebAuthn, everything that kind of comes along with those.
Okay, I love it. Let's see, we had another question that now I just scrolled off my screen here. There it is. Okay, this is from Sridhar wondering, so if we can address an issue of BYOD or bring your own device, can you give us some best practices for that?
Yeah, so when we're talking about BYOD and you're looking to establish some sort of trust between that specific device and your identity management solution. One of the first things that is kind of our go-to around that is ensuring that the device is compliant with your organization's security best practices and policies. And we have a number of different tools that we have here at CyberArk that we can actually go through, and before we provide or allow any sort of access to any protected corporate resources, we can, again, trust but verify whether or not that device meets our standards, and we will actually go ahead and allow it to connect to any corporate resources. So at the end of the day, it's about making it as least intrusive as it is to the end user while still allowing them to grant access. So I think that's probably that's the first step that we would recommend here at CyberArk before we do that, and that could be through our identity product, CyberArk Identity, or via our endpoint privilege manager, which can help mitigate an attacker potentially stealing session cookies off an endpoint if it's not protected correctly.
Okay. Is CyberArk going to integrate with existing on-prem AD? Question from Mark there.
Yeah, so CyberArk does fully integrate with on-prem AD, Azure AD, any LDAP directory, Google directory services. So we can really support a wide gamut of the most popular directory sources that are out there. So you don't have to go and reinvent the wheel or recreate your directory in the cloud. It can be used directly integrated with AD.
All right, this is great. You're just, I feel like sometimes we really dig in and you're just knocking these questions off. This is great. We're getting through quite a few. And thank you to all of you who are still sending these in. This one just came in from Brandon. It's a great question. Which OSs do you support for the automatic password change feature?
So if we're talking about changing on the the privileged side of the house, right? So things will you support all the big ones, right? You got your Linux variants, Windows servers, starting from any currently supported edition of Windows. We can go and rotate passwords for things that may be tied into other vendor products that may require additional privilege. Think about your scanning tools that go out and scan your network for vulnerabilities or for patch management or anything like that. So anything that really leverages privilege in your environment, there's a good chance that we have an integration that can help manage that. If you'd like to see a full list of all the different applications and services and vendors that we do support in terms of password rotation, please take a look at our marketplace.cyberark.com, and we have a whole list of every integration that we have through our C-Cubed Alliance.
That's perfect, because we did have some questions about integration, so you've answered that one. We still have quite a few questions that we haven't gotten to, but I think we're going to have to leave it there. But before you leave us, Jared, if somebody out there wants to get started with CyberArk and jump in right away, what would you recommend as that first step?
First step, always, holy cow, what do? We go to the website, right, www.cyberark.com, find the product on our website under our products form, see which one it is that you're interested in. We have a wide range of identity security products that we can help your organization with. Fill out a web form. We'll get back in touch with you. In some cases, you could download the resources directly from the from our webcast here, right, in the handout section. And those are probably the best way to get through that.
Yeah, and the resources that we've got in the handout section for you today are great. It's the two Gartner reports. So it's the Magic Quadrant for Access Management, which, as I understand, that's brand new, and then the 2022 Gartner Magic Quadrant for Privileged Access Management. So those are some great resources and follow-ups there for Jared. Jared, thank you so much for being here to talk to us today, for answering the audience's questions. I know we didn't get to all of them, so Jared, if you have a little time to stick around live chat, great. If not, we're going to make sure they get on over to your team so you can follow up via email. And thanks again. It's been a real pleasure chatting with you today.
Absolutely. Happy to hang out as well.
All right, and thanks to all of you out there who answered Jared's poll and then answered this follow-up poll here on what additional information you want to get. Again, this is you clicking the easy button, making sure that you get the information that you need, and CyberArk can put it right in your email inbox. You don't even have to go digging for it. So do click on that and head on over to that Handouts tab and grab those resources from CyberArk. Some really incredible resources waiting for you there. Those Gartner reports are really worth spending some time exploring. All right, well, boy, folks, I do not know how this happens so quickly every time, but here we are. We have arrived at our very last presentation of the EcoCast. I don't know about you guys, but this day has felt just jam-packed with information. And I'm sad that we are coming to the end, but I am happy that I get to introduce you all to Ryan Terry, Senior Product Marketing Manager at ReliaQuest. Ryan, thank you so much for being here to bring us on home in style today. I know you've got a lot of great content lined up, so I'm going to hand the mic right on over to you. Take it away, Ryan.
Perfect. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
I gotcha. Loud and clear.
I trust that you can. Okay, awesome. Hey, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you are in the world. So appreciative to be able to present to you for a few minutes today. What I want to do is just share more information about phishing and how to prevent phishing attacks from a ReliaQuest perspective. And I know you've had a very jam-packed day full of phishing presentations, and trust you've gotten some really good value out of these sessions, and hopefully I can add just a little bit more to your tool belt to help you as you think about protecting your organizations and your people from phishing attacks today. So what I want to do is share today some of the email phishing threats that we're seeing. Specifically, our Photon research team here at ReliaQuest is doing a lot of work detecting and investigating different phishing attacks and other attacks as well that we're seeing across our customer base and out in the world in today's threat environment. What our Photon threat research team is they comprise of security operations center, SOC experts, security researchers, security practitioners, and intelligence analysts. And they're dedicated to bringing the latest global analysis and essential updates within that cyber threat intelligence space for organizations everywhere. So I know our customers get a lot of value from this, but their work can be found publicly as well. We offer SOC Talk webinars regularly. They have threat advisory reports that we release regularly as well as newsletters and threat research blog posts. All of these can be found at reliaquest.com. But what I wanted to do is share some of the insights that that they have produced in their research for you today that will help give you kind of a sense of what types of phishing email threats that we're seeing out in the world today. Specifically, I'm going to dive into 3 of them. But before I do that, I just want to make sure, I set some context here. I know you've gotten a lot of good information about different products and different points of view on how to handle phishing attacks from some really great vendors out there. I just wanted to set some context before I dive into what we're seeing so we're all in the same playing field. Essentially is, we've got some really great tools. We've seen significant advances in technology, as well as phishing awareness programs and training and measuring those programs. But really, phishing attacks continue to be a persistent threat to both organizations and individuals alike. And that's really because while these tools are so effective and they're critical, we absolutely need them, but they're not 100% effective. There's still phishing emails that, slip past the email gateway or are specifically designed to do that. And that's really what I want to talk about today is 3 different types of email threats that our Photon research team has seen that are specifically designed to evade the secure email gateway. And so now they're past our threat controls, our preventative controls, and they're ending up in user inboxes. And, we're leaving those users, our people at the front line of defense for our organizations in this case. And the first of these threats you may be familiar with is these work to evade the secure email gateway is HTML smuggling. So this is a malware delivery mechanism. It's not a new technique, but has become more commonplace really following Microsoft's decision to block auto-enablement of macros. And many would suggest that Microsoft's decision to do this was long overdue. But bad actors, being as they are, being very opportunistic to find opportunities to exploit organizations and people, have quickly adapted to adapt to this change that Microsoft put in place. And HTML smuggling is a commonly used technique associated with a wide variety of threat groups, including cyber criminal, as well as nation-state actors. So kind of want to dive into how this works and what this looks like. So first, HTML smuggling works when threat actors deliver a phishing email with a URL or HTML attachment. And then it's executed as soon as the user interacts with the file, which is then decoded by a browser before loading a website. The payload for these is downloaded and assembled on the targeted device. They do this using JavaScript binary large object, or blob if you will, which acts in this case to embed or reconstruct large files. So this can bypass traditional email security controls, which typically only check emails for the usual suspicious attachments such as executables and zip files, or through traffic-based analysis. And another important thing to note here is the reconstructed file is built client-side, and therefore the downloaded event will not be logged by firewalls, forward proxies, or Windows event logs. That's kind of what it is, how it works. Here's a few examples, some of the findings from our closed resources team on HTML smuggling that you can see on this slide here. First, at the top right, smuggling is likely to be used alongside spamming activity. One user recommended using a combination of redirects, encoding, and HTML smuggling. It's realistically possible that internal hackers use these methods for email spamming. One of our key recommendations for this type of threat is to make users aware that these threats exist and train them on how to identify and report them. If one person in the organization reports something like this, it's likely your security team can then respond and take action before anyone else in the organization mistakenly clicks on these types of email attacks. We also identified several OS builders for smuggling activity. Some were most likely created by security researchers. It's really unclear why this technique would be used, but perhaps testing their own email security controls. Either way, the tool doesn't differentiate between white and black hat activity, so anyone can easily get a hold of these tools and commit to their own activity. And really, the bar is low. Through some simple searching, we identified several open source and builders dedicated to HTML smuggling and how it can be achieved. One example includes a program that leverages HTML5 and JavaScript to embed encoded file in the HTML file. This self-contained application works on most operating systems and appears to have been designed for legitimate uses. Of course, since the file is available in open source, the developer doesn't discriminate who can use it, whether they've got bad intentions, malicious intentions, or they're benign users. And then on the bottom right of the screen, this is just quickly an example of HTML smuggling used in an advertisement in Russia. So that was our first kind of example of email threats that evade the secure email gateway. The second is Exotic Lily. The Photon research team here has been investigating phishing attempts from the initial access broker, or IAB, Exotic Lily, which sells to compromised networks. It sells access to compromised networks. And this threat actor quickly achieved notoriety through their ties with well-known ransomware groups across the world. Exotic Lily specializes in gathering credentials from high-value targets through employee impersonation, also deep open source intelligence, and by creating convincing malicious documents. So they've been particularly prevalent and successful due to the high level of detail they apply to their phishing campaigns. And this is seen repeatedly through tried and tested efforts that typically begin with an open conversation to the victim, sourced from an email conversation from a fabricated business profile. So we've recently seen cases where the attacker spoofed the domain so that message looks particularly legitimate. And I'm going to dive into a few spoofing types later in this presentation, but spoofing the domain is using the exact email sending domain of the company they want to impersonate. Once email communication has been established between the bad actor and the target, these profiles then exploit the implied sense of trust to lure victims into navigating to, of course, a seemingly legitimate site to download malicious payloads. These are typically hosted on well-known file sharing platforms like OneDrive and others. Once the victim has downloaded the zip file and extracted the content, an ISO or IMG file type is downloaded to the victim's computer. The ISO or IMG file types are used to clone the entire contents of a system disk. And really, due to time, I don't want to dive into more about this, but we do have, our Photon research team does have a 30, 60, 90-day plan to help organizations deal with Exotic Lily and these types of threats. So you can find more information about this specific threat at our blog at reliaquest.com. And finally, the third type of email threats that we're seeing evade the secure email gateway. Again, not new. This is something that's been prevalent for several years, and there's obviously a ton of news about this. Typically every summer when the FBI releases their latest IC3 report about business email compromise or BEC attacks. But just kind of to piggyback off of the previous threat type, this does rely on impersonation and social engineering to build trust with an intended target or victim in order to work on the attacker's behalf. So much of the same way we've seen with the other threats, BEC attacks impersonate a trusted identity to trick someone into often sending money or valuable information on the attacker's behalf. Sometimes they're referred to as CEO spoofing or CFO spoofing attacks. And of course, as we've all seen in the news, really repeatedly, that these attacks are extremely effective. They've cost organizations more than $43 billion in the last 6 or 7 years or so, since 2016, since the FBI started tracking these scams. They do evade the secure email gateway because they don't often include a payload. So there's nothing for a secure email gateway or other threat tool to detect, analyze, delete from the email message before delivering to the user, and so on. So it's simply asking someone else to do something that would be part of their normal everyday job, typically sending money or valuable information on their behalf. So we've seen examples of vendors asking for money for the work that's been completed. We've seen examples in the Premier Soccer League with trades of players, in public schools with different transactions that they're expecting. Obviously, large technology companies have made the headline. We're seeing these types of attacks in the real estate industry with people losing money for their purchase of their homes, the down payments that they've saved up so hard to acquire. And it's just, these are very expected transactions. Through the use of social engineering, attackers can identify these transactions that are upcoming and insert themselves into the chain of the transaction chain. So quickly, I just wanted to, I did tease this out a bit ago, just wanted to kind of highlight the different types of tactics bad actors are using to deliver, threatening emails that evade the secure email gateway. Of course, the first one, everyone's familiar with this, is display name spoofing. This is the friendly name of the email that they can really change to be whoever they want. And then, of course, behind that, the actual email address is something completely dubious or not legitimate. Again, domain spoofing is where the bad guy hijacks the actual legitimate domain of the person they want to impersonate. So that could be, company one, if that's an actual company, .com, their actual domain. They're using that to send malicious email. And then, of course, lookalike domains, where they switch out numbers for letters and vice versa. They can use symbols instead of letters. And these are just used to look exactly like a legitimate company's domain to trick people into falling for the phishing attack. So going back to my original point towards the beginning of this presentation, it is important for organizations to have a multi-layered approach to their email security. We know secure email gateways are incredibly crucial and viable, as well as email threat solutions that sit in front of the user inboxes and prevent malicious emails from coming into the organization's ecosystem. But we do know, of course, that there are going to be times when malicious emails and unwanted emails slip past and end up into the user's inbox. So one of the key things we advise, of course, on all of these threats is just to help organizations arm their users to identify these types of threats and be constantly vigilant on the lookout for these types of threats in their inboxes. So, of course, there's a huge importance on phishing awareness programs. There's several out there that are great at not only training employees to identify these attacks, but really arming them to report them to an abuse mailbox that the security team can then take further action. But also you can report on how well users are being trained and how they're doing as well. And then that leads to kind of finally, we have the abuse mailbox, which is critical for organizations today for collecting any of information and email threats that are getting into your organizations, your users' inboxes, and making sure that your security team is armed and equipped to remove those from user inboxes before they interact or fall prey to these types of phishing attacks. Abuse mailboxes are also critical. There's a lot of great tools to help kind of have users report phishing emails or suspicious emails to the abuse mailbox. One of the challenges, though, is this is a heavy load. It's an increased workload for your security team because there's a large number of growing reported emails constantly populating the abuse mailbox. And there's, of course, within that, there's a large percentage of false positives that the security operations team has to go through one by one, each and every reported email to identify, and analyze whether or not it's actually legitimate or malicious, and then take, responding actions and make sure all of the corresponding malicious emails are removed from inboxes across the organization. And so really just wanted to tease who we are and what we offer at ReliaQuest just for the final minute here before we ask questions. But we're a security operations platform. We have a security operations platform called Gray Matter, which combines technology and our security expertise from our SOC members across the world. We're a force multiplier for your existing security team. And a key element of what we do is to help you get more out of your security tools that you're already using today. So I'm sure you've heard a lot about some great tools today and across, constantly as you work in this industry. But, we work and integrate with firewalls, endpoint security solutions, work with, one or more clouds, SIEMs, and also email security tools as well, which I'll cover here in a second. But we offer bidirectional integration, so we can absorb those alerts into our operations platform, but also help you take action through those existing technologies across your entire security stack. And really what our goal is to do is to give our customers visibility across their entire security ecosystem, reduce complexity for them. We know that, cybersecurity is one of the greatest challenges of our lifetime, and we just are here to give you more visibility, decrease complexity for you, and help manage risk across the ecosystem. And as it relates to phishing, as part of that platform, we just recently released our Phishing Analyzer product, which really helps automate the abuse mailbox. So the entire process of once an email arrives in the abuse mailbox, it's analyzed through all of the intelligence that we have from our Gray Matter operations platform. It takes remediation action. So if it's malicious, removing those malicious emails from user inboxes across the organization, and also kind of follows up to close the loop with the reporters and helps them know, whether or not those emails were malicious or benign and why, and gives a full detailed report to the security team. So I don't want to dive too much into this today, but we are going to have a webinar more about this solution and give a demo on March 22nd. If you're interested in learning more, you can visit reliaquest.com and go to our Phishing Analyzer page and register for this webinar that's happening next week. And with that, I will open up for any questions.
Awesome. Ryan, thank you so much for that presentation. Super interesting. And as I said at the start, I knew you were going to be a great grand finale. You did not disappoint. Thank you for bringing us home in style. I'm going to throw up a quick poll on the screen here, and what we're looking for is what additional information you would all like to get about the ReliaQuest solution. So again, some great options for follow-up, and there's obviously lots more to dig into. There's a lot that we didn't get to cover in a quick 20-minute overview. So take a moment now and make sure you click on that poll and let ReliaQuest know how they can follow up with you. While you're doing that, Ryan and I are going to dig into some questions. You ready to jump in?
Sure.
All right. So what are some ways that we can help our employees identify these type of bad emails? Interesting.
Yeah, that could take a long time, but briefly, we do, obviously, I think the first step is just understanding, you know, what are the threats. And that's what hopefully I did today, was just give you a short glance into some of the threats that we're seeing on our side of, you know, what's coming into the inbox. And just, of course, there's great programs out there about phishing awareness, but just really helping people, you know, sharing examples with images, highlighting, you know, what is a key for making it benign or malicious, and then just really instructing people to be overly cautious and report those to the abuse mailbox, like I mentioned. Anything that seems out of the ordinary or something outside of your job description, definitely report those into your security team.
Yeah, this has come up a lot today, the communication and avoiding silos and cross-team communication and just general awareness being really important. Another question here coming in, because there's, you know, as we've said, and you've mentioned this, there's lots of great tools out there, and there's lots even that we've seen here today. And I think there's a lot of ways that some of these things play together well, you know, training and technology and such really in connection. So if there was one thing that really stood out and makes ReliaQuest unique, what would you say that is?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really our operations platform, our security operations platform that's technology agnostic. So we're integrating with all the tools that you're using across your security ecosystem and just ingesting all of that information, and then also helping you take action from one place across your security tech stack. So just our whole goal really is to make security possible by arming your security operations team to, you know, free up time, reduce noisy alerts, manage the stuff that's actually critical, the bad, you know, the phishing emails, the other alerts that are critical and important, and reduce the noise of those things that aren't, and just giving you time back to focus on the most important things across your security priorities.
Boy, isn't that the best gift that we can give anyone, is just time back in their day.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think that's a great key unique and a great place to end it. So for anyone out there that is completely sold by that wonderful key unique and wants to jump in and definitely wants to learn a little bit more, what do you recommend is that sort of first step to getting started here?
Yeah, obviously you could head to our website. I think if you're wanting to learn more about the research our team puts out, which I think is ultimately going to help you, you know, tune up your controls and arm your people, your users against these types of attacks, check out what our Photon research team does regularly through some of those SOC Talk webinars, some of the reports they put out, and the blog posts as well. So all of this is found on our website, reliaquest.com.
Perfect. Okay. Well, I think that we've got a lot of avid fans out there, and there's certainly a lot of great questions coming in, so we'll make sure that all of that gets on over to your team. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Thanks for rounding out what has been a really informative day. I appreciate your presentation, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, and for those of you that haven't already done so, I know there's a few questions about those where, you know, resources and things, and as Ryan just mentioned, ReliaQuest has some really incredible resources that are worth digging into. One of them is linked in the handouts tab. and that's the ReliaQuest Gray Matter Phishing Analyzer Solution Brief. So go check that out. Learning about automating the abuse mailbox. This is such a great and very concise look at a super cool concept, which is automating your abuse mailbox and saving your security team that time and identifying those threats faster. So please do go check out that handout. But for now, we've got some more excitement. I don't know if it's more exciting than automating your abuse mailbox, but it's pretty darn exciting. We're going to give away our very last $300 Amazon gift card. A quick reminder that you do need to be here live and present with us at the EcoCast today in order to win. So our very last lucky winner of a $300 Amazon gift card is Belinda Jouot of Louisiana. Belinda Jouot of Louisiana. And I promised I would review the entire winners list. So today we have Jeff Fisher of Washington, Roberto Reyes of Maryland, and Belinda Jouot of Louisiana. You have each won a $300 Amazon gift card. Congratulations, folks. All right. Well, if you're out there thinking to yourself right now, man, this has been fun, and I think I'd like to be a part of this party, we would also like you to be a part of this party. So come join us. Come present on a future summit, an EcoCast, a megacast, a webinar, whatever you have in mind. Reach out to us at connect@actualtechmedia.com. We would absolutely love to be in touch with you about that. Well, with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank all of our incredible speakers here with us today, from Graphis, from Rubrik, Duo Security, Cofense, Palo Alto Networks, CyberArk, and ReliaQuest for making this EcoCast possible. A very special thank you to all of you for attending, for asking some really wonderful questions. I honestly had such a great time with all of you today, kind of as we dug into some of this talk around phishing, the conversation around phishing, which can feel, you know, like a big, overwhelming wave that's impossible to protect against. And today, I think maybe we all got some great tools for stemming that tidal flow. It is very hard not to make a bunch of water analogies and puns when we're talking about phishing, but thank you for coming along with me on that ride. I hope that you've all gotten some interesting ideas, some tips. Maybe, you know, I know we started, and we've talked about this a few times, there's a lot that feels concerning. It can sometimes hit that sort of panic button for us internally. And somebody asked right at the start that difference between fear and awareness. And I've said this before, I've made this analogy before. When I lived up in the Yukon, they would talk a lot about the difference between paranoid and bear aware. And the difference between being aware of threats and being absolutely paranoid to the point where you don't go outside, you don't go on the adventures that you want to go on. And that's paranoia. And what we're going for here is bear aware. So we want to be aware of the phishing threats, but we want to acknowledge that business still needs to function, and life still needs to function, and our employees still need to function. And I'm hoping that we were able to kind of walk that balance with all of you today. So, and best of all, I hope you had fun. And I hope that you're feeling pumped up to come back and join us again. We actually have a megacast tomorrow, from the data center to the cloud, optimizing and modernizing IT infrastructure. So that's March 16th, that's tomorrow, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. So come join us for that megacast. It's going to be a really fascinating conversation, and we've got a lot of cool stuff to dig into. So please do come take part in that conversation. All right, well, until tomorrow then, until I get to see you all again, I hope you have an absolutely wonderful end to your day.